meeting is hereby called to order. Please rise for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. In the pledge, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members of council have received copies of the minutes for the workshop and our regular meeting on March 4th. Are there any additions, substitutions, or comments? Hearing none, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. We'll now move on to the public comment. This portion of the agenda is designed for members of the general public to share thoughts on items of interest in the community. Council members may ask clarifying questions or discuss procedural matters, but are not permitted to discuss the policy merits of any issue unless it is scheduled for a discussion. Today we'll give everyone 1 minute to make their case.
So first up, Barbara Kraft, and then Catherine Joswick.
Good evening. I'll make it brief. My name is Barbara Kraft. I'm speaking on behalf of the following property owners in Charlestown. My husband, Jerry Kraft, Trudy and Jeff Roth, Dean Kern, and Priscilla Roth. They couldn't be here, but I speak for them. As Charlestown property owners, we are not concerned about sewer rate increases as a result of not issuing the bond. Rather, we are concerned about getting stuck with heavy pollution, undrinkable water, and rate increases when inevitable industrial accidents require cleanup, and Rockwool and other polluters will say it's not their problem. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Catherine Joswick, and then Lori Maloney.
My name is Catherine Joswick. I'm from Harpers Ferry, and I speak today on the behalf of 1,015 Charlestown residents and homeowners that signed the petition. There has been some debate over how many freeholders this actually represents, but I know that it actually represents over 30% of the Charlestown properties. I was one of those who gathered the petitions, and I can tell you that it was signed both by those people who are anti-Rockwool as well as pro-Rockwool. What these people had in common was the belief that the advantages and disadvantages of state financing and city financing of such a large sewer system were not clear or were unknown. So recently you have received legal memos from Ranson stating you're under the obligation to receive or to serve Ranson customers. And that puts you in quite a predicament, I think. But I think in agreement with the 1,015 people who signed the petition that to fund a large sewer project without knowing what is coming through that sewer is not a responsible action.
Thank you for your comments.
Thanks.
Lori Maloney and then John Doyle.
Thank you. I urge you tonight to table the vote, and please don't act tonight out of a desire to just let the community heal and go back to normal, because after this, there is no new normal. There is no going back to normal. It's a new normal with Rockwool. And I want to ask in particular that you look again into the question of whether you are required to take the waste. The DEP said that you are not required to take it. The Public Service Commission did not give an adequate answer to that question, and if it was yes, then why was that response so long? It should have just said yes. Also, as we know, we keep hearing you are only required to take the waste if it does not have a negative impact on the system. As I've said before to this council, I believe that the chlorides in Rockwool's waste stream and other unknown constituents would cause damage to the system as shown by scientific studies. So please, the best decisions are well informed. Do not hurry this. Take a little more time and get the answers right. Please table the vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, John Doyle, and then Kirsten Lee.
Thank you, Your Honor, and members of the council. Delegate Sammy Brown, who just came in, and I have spent the last 60 days plus in Charleston, and we spent a lot of that time trying like the Dickens to fight Rockwell. This fight is not over, and I think everyone who thinks Rockwell should not be part of Jefferson County should do everything he or she can do to help stop it. I believe this council can take that action tonight by either turning this proposal down or at the very least tabling it. So I strongly urge you to do so. Thank you.
Kirsten Lee, and then Jay Mansfield.
I join with others in asking you to table the consideration of the sewer bond until all questions are answered and a complete development plan under Rule 5.5 can be considered. For the last many months, scores of your constituents have shown up at these meetings and at other town, county, and state meetings. We've asked valid questions, brought up hard scientific, legal, and moral reasons challenging the direction sewer, water, and industry seem to be going, in direct contradiction to the envisioned Jefferson 2035 comprehensive plan. None of these questions have been answered. Recent failures in the current system have been brought up. FOIA searches continue to reveal irregularities and downright illegalities within the process. Moving forward in the face of so much uncertainty is foolhardy and irresponsible. Rockwell's been caught in many documentable inconsistencies and outright lies. They've shown an inability to meet the terms and conditions necessary to ensure environmental and public safety. Now they're demanding you accept their industrial waste before they have revealed what will be in it or even what the flow rate will be, and sticking West Virginia taxpayers with the bill. The Charlestown City Council has a responsibility to fairly and effectively regulate the sewer utility with respects to rates, borrowing, and capital projects. We urge you to please table the bond motion until questions are answered and a comprehensive solution can be developed. Thank you.
After Jay is Chris Kinnon.
Jay Mansfield, Shepherdstown. I'm a registered Republican, and I vote against pollution. The Scientific Symposium on Air Quality is April 27th all day. Without air pollution, I practiced swimming 20 hours a week every week and won Illinois State Swimming Championship in 1972. It takes a lot of fresh air to swim 7 to 10 miles a day and work out hard enough and long enough to win state. This will never happen here with 180,000 times more pollution. Smokestack technology fails during a temperature inversion. Smokestacks in this county will work 70% of the time. Technology failures attract lawsuits, 3,200 kids, $500,000 per kid, $1.6 billion in liability. That will attract major league class action firms. If you build it, they will come. They will most definitely come. Because of heavy industry near schools, you are exposed, and you are very vulnerable and surrounded by legal animals who eat their own young. You will be paying the same legal counsel to get you out of lawsuits that you paid to keep you out of lawsuits. This is the county where bad ideas come to die. Stop heavy industry. Table this until we have all the information, please.
Chris Kinnon, and then Nancy Gregory.
Hi, good evening. I'm Chris Kinnan. I live in Jefferson County. I'm representing Jefferson County Vision. I'm also a Republican as well, Republican. I'm just here to ask you tonight to be confident that you have all the facts before you take this vote. This is an enormous vote with consequences this year, next year, and in the future. And I don't think you have all the facts because we don't have the Section 5.5 analysis. The DEP permit, frankly, is insufficient for what capacity you're actually building. The Ranson $1 million has a lot of odd origins and accounting. I think you all should table this vote. The people that brought this project here have abandoned it. The JCDA left. The people that were elected have lost their seats. It's in your lap now. You should table it until July and get answers to these questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy Gregory, and then Tim Ross.
This is a class war. West Virginia is a poor state, and we're being treated like second-class citizens by corrupt politicians in a company that wouldn't behave the way it does here in the European Union. In France, public consultation meetings before they make the decision to build or not to build, 1 year of environmental impact studies, electric arc ovens, integrated wastewater treatment, 2 round tanks in front of the building. We get coal ash ponds overcast and discharge to the overcapacity local sewer. They get a site up on a plateau. Rockwell says their other French plant was sited poorly in the Bolva Valley. Guess what we get? The Bolva Valley. They get no nearby schools. We know what we get. If I was a public official, I would be embarrassed not to do everything in my power to stop this project. If I was a Rockwell attorney, I'd be suing the West Virginia officials who sold them a bill of goods by promoting this Jefferson Orchard site, which is the equivalent to building on Swiss cheese. Thank you, Tim Ross. You can act tonight by tabling the vote. This was a class war, and the people will prevail.
Tim Ross, and then Mary Ellen.
West Virginia has a set of laws about intergovernmental relations. In other words, who has what responsibility for what expenditures of public monies. Specifically, Article 8-33-5 is about the type of indebtedness the Building Commission cannot assume. The statute clearly states that a Building Commission cannot assume any debt of a municipality. No indebtedness of any nature of a commission, I'm quoting, shall constitute an indebtedness of any municipality or county creating or establishing such commission or a charge against any property of said municipality or county. In other words, the Building Commission was created by a municipality or a county. The commission is being asked to assume a substantial financial obligation, indebtedness. The indebtedness includes $1 million or more of Ranson's indebtedness in the form of a loan from BB&T Bank, which is incurring at least $143 a day in interest on that debt. There's no question that the amount of the bond includes payment for the Ranson indebtedness. John Reisenweber stated in January 5 Facebook post on Thursday, the IGDC approved the City of Charlestown's request to reassign the sewer financing to the Charlestown Bidding Commission, and they increased the amount by $1.5 million that will cover the design funds incurred by Ranson prior to the consolidation.
Thank you for
In
your
the
comments.
words, right there. My God, what a freaking mess.
Mary Ellen?
What a freaky mess indeed. Those are the words from a recent FOIA of Jonathan Fowler, the senior staffer that helped draft the PSC reply to the question prompted by Councilman Strainer's question about CTUB having to accept industrial waste. Fowler is also the PSC representative at the Infrastructure and Jobs Development Council. He is the prime reason that Rockwell is here. He was thrilled when the IJDC approved the JCDA water line and Ranson sewers. He actually thanked Ranson for taking on this project. In his email, Fowler went on to say, item 14 of the DEP permit seems to be contrary to the PSC policy. It sure is causing a lot of grief at CT Council anyway. Doesn't sound like someone with a firm grip on the facts, does he? John Ulville, the person that provided Jonathan input for the writing of that memo, closed with these words, I am not sure our rules delineate between regular domestic sewage and industrial sewage. As stated above, if the waste product is something the utilities plant cannot handle, I think a utility could refuse to provide or require the customer to pre-treat or pay for upgrades to the plant. I am aware of circumstances where utilities charge a special fee to industrial customers for the treatment of industrial waste.
Thank you for your comments.
It is my understanding that the Rockwell circumstances, the waste will be basically domestic.
David Levine and then Sean Amos.
Hello. The Charlestown City Council has the responsibility to fairly and effectively regulate the sewer utility with respect to rates, borrowing, and capital projects. We know on one hand what will happen if you vote yes on the sewer bond. We have no idea what will happen if you vote no on the sewer bond. Rule 5.5 must be considered in the context of a complete development plan that includes the scope of the project, the priorities, a reasonable repayment forecast, and the repayer impact. At this point, we have no idea if Rockwell is going to choose a bigger project or a smaller project. We have no idea what the priorities around the smaller project, what else would be financed. So the only choice isn't just tabling it, but tabling it for a sufficient amount of time for all of these decisions to be made. And that really is
your comments.
July. So let's take our time and do this right. Thank you.
Sean Amos and then Nicola Bastian.
Tonight I'm coming here to ask you to vote no on the sewer bond tonight. Just tonight in Wetzel County, where my grandparents are from, somebody dumped stuff down the sewer. It turned out to be dry cleaning fluid. And now everybody in Paden City has to have water bottled into their house. They can no longer drink fresh water. Nobody gave them the right to put that stuff down the sewer. Nobody knew that they were doing it. But it went down the sewer, it leaked out into the water table, and now those people have nothing to drink. It's Charleston all over again, but on a much smaller scale. We have no idea what's going down that sewer. When I hear that this thing is going to be written off, that this bond is going to be forgiven, I would beg you to remember who's actually paying that. It's the taxpayers. This loan doesn't just disappear. The money is somebody's money. And it's whose money? It's our money. It's our taxes that end up doing that. Everybody here tonight is asking you not to do this. It's the Charlestown Building Commission. When I go to these meetings, I hear that they're going to put in a new police station. I hear that they're going to be doing something for Charlestown. You're asking them to build a sewer out there. It's not even in Charlestown. And yet it's the money of the people of Charlestown that's being put up to front this. When the
Thank you for
people
your
of
comments.
Charlestown are asking you not to do it. Vote no on it tonight.
Nicola Bastian from Millville. This is beginning to feel like family, and I'm all for tabling it so I can come back here and hear all this amazing research and all these amazing speeches. It is like fabulous. And besides, I like your horseshoe arrangement. I think that's a really good type of energy that we got here. And I only want to reiterate questions that have yet to be answered. I'm still puzzled with the capacity of the given system when you have to dump untreated sewer. How can you take more? I'm just not getting it. I mean, I know I'm not very smart, but that question, how can you take more sewer without paying for a big treatment plant is a big puzzle. And for the rest of it, you know, most of you know what to do for future generations. I know you do.
Thank you for your comments.
Jennifer King, and then Dave Yowzy.
Good evening. Recommended reading: the Municipal Handbook for Elected Officials by the West Virginia Municipal League. Public hearings and regular meetings are defined in this handbook. This is the most important sentence regarding public hearings. Additional work sessions at subsequent meaning generally follow the public hearing before final council action on the matter at a regular hearing. How are you going to submit a petition without having work sessions to learn more about the topic? There should have been another public hearing. There is no law saying another public hearing cannot be held, and as referenced in the municipal handbook, it is encouraged. An additional meeting of the council for the public hearing can be valuable in providing the public an opportunity to learn the current status of a project and give the council, as the public policy makers, clear indications of public sentiment before making a decision. By the definitions in this handbook, the public hearing was scheduled out of order. Steptoe set the ordinance and the vote schedule. No one questioned it. At the last meeting, the council followed the advice of Steptoe and were shepherded into an executive session which broke Open Meetings Act on probably 2 accounts, definitely 1 because it was not on the agenda to go into executive session regarding the petition. I used to think the biggest mistake of this council was not seeking other counsel other than Steptoe. Now I see the biggest mistake is not listening to the people, your people, the ones who put you in these seats. We won't stop. We'll get to the truth.
Yowzy. Is it Dave Yowzy? And Sharon Wilt.
Thank you, members of the council. As the council members are aware, the Public Service Commission's General Counsel has written to CTUB unequivocally affirming CTUB's obligation to provide domestic and industrial service to Rockwool. The PSC's clarity on this topic, as well as the CTUB's professionalism and unfailing courtesy in dealing with these issues, are greatly appreciated by Rockwool. Because the PSC letter confirms that service must be provided to the Rockwool Ranson facility, the question before this City Council this evening is simply one of how the sewer service will be paid for. While it's fully recognized that some members of this council don't want the Rockwool facility here, it's equally important for everyone to recognize that a no vote rejecting the state's financing offer or tabling it won't stop the sewer service from being provided. It will simply lead to constituents paying the price for it. At every turn, Rockwool has done its best to work collaboratively and transparently with members of the council, with CTUB, and with all stakeholders on these and other issues that have arisen. I can assure
Thank you for your comments.
That Rockwool remains as committed to ever to working with you.
Sharon Wilt, and then Christine Weimer.
Well, I'm not a very fast reader, but I hope I get this all in time. On Friday, March 8th, a group of us drove to New York for the final day of Circular City Week. Sean Tolbert, U.S. Public Affairs Manager for Rockwell, was the lead keynote speaker of the 3 speakers that evening. Mr. Tolbert, in his presentation to a packed room that evening, included waste. He spoke of their biggest problem right now is separation of waste, that they have been able to and had been shipping their waste, i.e. Rockwell's waste, to China, which they can no longer do this. So now it sits in trains in the southeast somewhere. It sits in rots. Those were his words. This is a public affairs manager point blank saying in a room full of people in New York, saying we were shipping our waste to China, but they want to run it down our sewers. And it's the same company that wants you, us, this county to believe no toxins will go down a sewer pipe into our water. I have said this before, and I'll say it again tonight. The devil is in the details. The details have not been given. They've been denied. So there's no way to make a well-informed decision that will affect this county, neighboring counties for years to come. I ask you tonight to table this sewer bond until all information is disclosed. Thank you.
Christine Weimer and then Billy Gard.
Yes, hi. Last time when I was here, I asked you to find the courage to vote the people's will and vote no on this bond. After that, I was told that there are 2 things. There is the people's will and then there is the law. And if that is how you feel, then I ask you, please find some legal advice that is not conflicted. Please find some legal advice that does not stand to have a financial gain if you vote yes. Please find some legal advice that has not been shown to be colluding with the company and the state against the people's will and the town. Please do not be bullied by Ranson. Please find the courage to find and take the time to find the legal advice that is in the town's interest and the people's interest, not just in the interest of the state and the company. Please find the courage to vote the people's will. Vote no on this bond. Thank you.
Billy Gard and then Chris Marshall.
I know you've been inundated this week with emails and messages. I wrote you a 4-page letter in response to the Ranson letters. I don't know if you've read it, but it's an open letter, and I hope that you have. You received a 3-page letter from the PSC purporting to answer Bob Trainor's question. And I was going to spend my entire 3 minutes saying they didn't answer your question. There's one sentence in that letter, one sentence that comes close to what to answering your question. If they could say no or yes, they would have done so. Instead, they quote information. Who knows where they got it? I'm assuming Rockwell and its lawyers, that says we think that really the sewage is basically domestic waste. There's been no hearing. There's been no transcript. There's no evidence. No one signed anything under oath to the PSC about what is in that waste and whether or not you have to take it. They write a process letter, and that process letter does not answer your question. There is an answer to that question, but that isn't in that letter, and you need more time to get to the bottom of that. Everyone else has spoken about why.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Chris Marshall and then Amy Piedrahati.
Section C14 of the CTUB's MPDES permit. Any future collection system extensions projected to cause an increase in wastewater flow equal to or greater than 87,500 gallons per day shall require the permittee to contact the director to secure approval of the extension. The Hatch-Chester study says that peak flows in 2019 is expected to be 100,000 gallons per day, and by 2025, 200,000 gallons per day. Has the Charlestown Utility Board received approval by the DEP director for the Route 9 sewer line extension and its connecting to the Charlestown wastewater treatment plant? If so, what conditions have they placed on the utility? Do Charlestown wastewater treatment plants have the capacity to accommodate the anticipated flows, which is 918,000 gallons per day? This is for the sewer line. If it's determined by the West Virginia DEP that Charlestown and Tuscaloosa wastewater treatment plants need to be expanded before 2033, or a new wastewater treatment plant needs to be built, how will the utility pay for this added capacity?
Thank you for your comments.
After Amy is Addison Reese.
Hello. I've lived in Cannondale for 27 years. Many years ago, a very wise mentor told me that decisions become easy. They become obvious when you have enough information. So I ask you, before you vote, ask yourselves this question: do I understand what my vote means? Do you understand whether or not you actually have to accept industrial waste? Have you asked your own attorneys? Do you understand how much industrial waste you would be receiving? The numbers have changed at least 3 times so far. Do you understand how much your vote would cost the ratepayers? Do you understand how much your vote would cost Charlestown or Jefferson County? Do you understand the cost of operating and maintaining additional infrastructure, and who pays for that? Do you understand what will be in Rockwell's industrial waste? Do you understand the level of corrosiveness and the risk to the equipment that you already have? Do you understand what chemicals
Comments?
and processes will be required to treat this industrial waste?
Addison.
You can do better. Do your due diligence, please. Please table this vote.
Addison Reese and David Tabb. Addison Reese. About David Tabb, and then we'll go back to Addison.
David Tabb, Jefferson County resident. CTUB has a daily discharge capacity of 1.75 million gallons per day. On December the 18th, the rate was 1.6 million gallons a day. That was for the whole month of December. For the whole month of January 19 was 1.66 million gallons a day. The EDM reports from March to November of 2018 are still on posted, have not been posted by the request of Kirsten Stolliper, dated 2019. The documents are in here. Within the permit and the language, and once the plant goes into a 90% over capacity, you should have to submit a water waste capital plant upgrade. On April the 2018, CTUB produced a draft that requested the increase of Charlestown plant from 1.75 million gallons per day to 2.25 million gallons a day, and increase the Tuscaloosa from 500,000 gallons to 1 million gallons, with an estimated cost of the plant of Charlestown at $3.4 million and Tuscaloosa at $10.6 million. Under section 7.75, the finance planning that they're requesting that there may be a rate increase on this structure. I don't have enough time to do all of it.
Thank you for your comments.
Yep.
After Addison Reese is Juliana Brogna.
I'd first like to thank all of you on the council who have gone above and beyond to sift through documents and emails, listening to citizens, and asking thoughtful and important questions, some of which are still unanswered. The narrative that not accepting the bond will definitively increase rates is disingenuous. The real cost will come later when upgrades need to be made to increase capacity, and there's also the potential for industrial waste to corrode pipes. Rockwell has been anything but transparent. According to the IJDC funding application, they have maximum and average daily flows up to 100,000 gallons per day. The Deloitte study shows up to 95,000 gallons per day. How do we know what these numbers are actually going to be? And even when they've come here, we haven't gotten those answers. Sorry. And they told us, Kristen said that I think May is when you get the full plans of their facility, and I think you should wait until you have that, where you know where the pipes are coming in and out. I think that's really important for you to make these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Juliana Brogna, and then Lynn Dellis.
Good evening, Council. At the last meeting, I spoke to you about an alleged disclosure of a legal memo prepared for the Council regarding the petition that was presented last week. On March 6, a request was made by a local resident to the City Manager, Darrell Hennessy, for a copy of that memo and the communications that initiated it. The legal memo was not provided, but we did learn this from the communications. The initial request for this regarding this petition came not from City Council, but from Rockwell. On October 9th, Rockwell leadership contacted its outside counsel, who then in turn contacted Todd Hooker at IJDC, Sammy Gee, the IJDC Bond Counsel, and John Stump at Steptoe & Johnson. Within hours, a Steptoe associate had drafted a memo, and 2 days later, it was forwarded to Mr. Hennessy. Let me ask the council this. Where is your legal representative here? We requested the engagement agreement related to this work in a formal FOIA request on March 11th. A copy of the request and a timeline of events was emailed to each of you. You have it in your emails. Mr. Hennessy has not yet provided the agreement, so we don't know what the legal relationship is here. So, it appears that Rockwell requested assistance to put down a citizen's petition, and then lawyers with no formal ties to the City Council for the petition matter provided legal advice in written and then again in verbal form during your executive session. You base your decisions on these.
Lynn Dells, I'm sorry, and then Mary Reed.
Good evening. This meeting is a violation of West Virginia open meetings law. The Charlestown City Council website posts the rules of the council, the governing rules, including the time frame required for posting of agendas. The meeting agenda was not posted in compliance with Article 111.1, Section 2B, which states as follows. The agenda shall be posted on the bulletin board for city meetings located at 105 South George Street and on the city website 4 days prior to the scheduled meeting. Revisions to the posted agenda can be made. However, this amended agenda must be made available 3 days in advance of the scheduled meeting. For purposes of calculating the number of days in any notice period contained in these rules, Saturdays, Sundays, and legal holidays are excluded. The agenda for the March 18th meeting was posted on an unknown date the week of March 11th, and then, for unknown reasons, was taken down to amend and add additional items to the agenda. Members of the public did not see any agenda for some period of time last week and may not know that the vote on the sewer bond was scheduled for tonight. Then the amended agenda was reposted on or about 3 p.m. on March 15, 2019. The amended agenda includes item 3252 under unfinished business as the second and final consideration of an ordinance authorizing the acquisition and construction of a public sewage system by the Charlestown Building Commission sewer bond ordinance.
Thank you for your comments.
There was no insufficient notice provided to the public in the amended agenda posted on March 15th. The meeting and the bond vote cannot legally proceed as scheduled.
Mary Reed, and then Jackie Milliron. Mary Reed, yeah. Miss Milliron, if you want to come up.
I'd like to say to you all that I have been impressed that you ask questions and then you seek the answer instead of making a decision. I've been very impressed. But I'm very confused when I got this Department of Environmental Protection notice about the sewer. Because one of the things it says is that Rockwell is a non-significant industrial user. And over here it says permitted non-domestic wastewater at or above 25,000 gallons per day is a significant industrial user. And I'm not sure where I got this from. I think probably from listening to one of your meetings. And I think you all got a letter on February 5th, 2019.
Ma'am, thank you for your comments.
Saying there were 46,000 gallons per day used. And thank you.
Jackie Milliron, and then Morgan Sell.
I'm requesting that the $5.4 million revised PSD project, which is slated to increase rates by 76 cents per 1,000 gallons per month, be included in the sewer bond. giveaway from the state. You may ask why? Well, because the PSD project was originally initiated by the city of Ranson and requested by the JCDA. And for them to get free money from the state and CTUB, ratepayers get left holding the bag is just plain wrong. In light of this, I stand before you tonight to request that you consider including in the Route 9 sewer bond the excess capacity cost in the CTUB's revised $5.4 million project, which is a revision of the PSD $7 million project, where the state generously provided free infrastructure to developers, but made the utilities' existing ratepayers unfairly pay as captive investors. And I am imploring you to check into Title 155.5. I have called the state. I'm really, really annoyed at the 42 cents. I don't even know why that's even there.
Thank you for your comments.
Morgan Sell and then Sammy Brown.
Dear Council, thank you for your consideration on this very sensitive subject. Thank you for hearing us. Thank you for listening to us, and please table the vote. My name is Morgan Sell, and I'm a community organizer for the residents of Jefferson County, West Virginia. Today I tried to go to the park with my son. While walking away from our car to the park, my son started to cough. He started to cough so much that my heart started to race. My mind started thinking, where is his inhaler? Can we make it back to the car in time? In case he needs it, will he be okay? Will I? Breathe, Morgan, breathe. What about my friend who lost his 27-year-old daughter to an asthma attack? Okay, let's walk back to the car. Let's be close to the car in case we need it. Next week, I will be meeting with a fellow mother of sons with asthma. It just so happens that her sons attend North Jefferson Elementary. And where's Rockwool? I think we got ghosted. Ghosting is breaking off a relationship by ceasing all communication and contact with the former partner without any apparent warning or justification, as well as ignoring the former partner's attempts to reach out or communicate. The term originated in 2011, but we definitely are getting ghosted right now. I haven't seen him for a long time.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Sammy Brown.
Sammy Brown, proudly the delegate here for Charlestown and Ranson for the 65th District. I've been home for all of 30 minutes, and I'm here to speak for the people's will. It is very clear to me that resoundingly the folks here in your community would like you to table this particular vote. And I do think it was a friend of mine that said that there is a difference between the law and the people's will. And in that, you are very much right. But then between my colleague and I, we have the charge of creating law and crafting law that reflects the people's will. And so if you, as the City Council of Charlestown, decide that you are going to table this vote, that you would like to move forward in a mindful way, know that you have legislators that are here to back you up, that are here to perpetuate the right that we can do here, and business and mindful economic development that could, in fact, reflect the people's will. That being said, I want to call out that it is very ironic that we have made it so that the people's will is only reflected in 1 minute or less per person, and yet they are the ones that will be shouldering the fiscal responsibility for a project they clearly do not want. That being said, I am Sammy Brown. Thank you so much for the individuals that came out tonight, and I think that closes out your comments for the evening.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming out and speaking tonight. We're going to go on to reports. Mayor's report. I have nothing for this evening. Ward 1. Ward 2.
All right, I got some statistics of my own. Pancake Day. 2,000 people showed up for Pancake Day.
Wow.
510 pounds of batter, 1,300 pounds of sausage, 125 gallons of milk, and 120 dozen eggs. So it was a successful event, and for the people of Citizens Company 2. Also, I had a chance to meet with proprietors of Inkwell's Tavern and T-Dog's Barbecue. Definitely check those two places out. They're fantastic. I want to lead also with, no offense, Mr. George, but I went to Old Opera House and saw in Broken Circle It's an amazing, powerful production. I definitely recommend that. And last but not least, I want to wish a happy birthday to my mom. So thank you.
Very good. Ward 3?
I got nothing. Yeah, top that.
Yeah, I can't. Let's go to Ward 4.
I'm good.
I just want to add on to Councilman Zaglifa's nice presentation for the Old Opera House. Just want to remind everyone it's the last weekend. It's this weekend to see that show. And I would greatly appreciate if a lot of people could come out to see it. It's a really good show. And tickets haven't been selling that good, so I'm sure you can get a seat. So come out and see it. Also, I did attend the CTUB meeting last Wednesday. I guess we'll talk about more that has come up later. That's it.
All right, thank you. Do we have any committee reports for tonight?
Real quick, Mayor, Personnel Committee met today. Each of you were given an evaluation form and an envelope. I ask each of you fill it out and submit it to City Hall by noon on April 1st. I'll email you guys an electronic copy of that. If you wish to do it electronically, that's fine. Our hope is to have a recommendation for your approval on or near April 15th. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, City Manager's report.
So a couple of items to note. One is we've completed the competitive selection process for the strategic grant writer and consultant for the city. This was one of the things we had talked about as part of the current budget. There were two firms that were identified as qualified, E3 Consulting and Sustainable Strategies. We've worked with Sustainable Strategies in the past. It's staff's recommendation that we would enter into a contract with both parties, but it would be a different arrangement than we've done in the past. Basically, we would recommend that we do a master agreement and then basically pay by the tasks as the tasks are completed. So not a retainer arrangement, but like I said, a task-oriented pay-as-you-go kind of contract instead. So that's issue one. And then issue two, West Virginia Division of Highways. A couple of projects seem to be moving forward. We had talked about the ADA compliant ramps last year. These are the ramps along Washington out through Martin Luther King and George Street. They have been painted, so it looks like DOH is about ready to begin that project. So I wanted to let you know we're monitoring that closely. They are not proposing, based upon a conversation we'd had with them, that these would involve any of the bump outs. So there have been no design changes that suggest that, so we'll continue to monitor that. And the other issue then is the intersection there at Washington, Summit Point, and Martin Luther King. We had reported that DOH was going to do a study to determine what was the best way to handle the traffic through that area. We've circled back with DOH, with the regional planning folks. They've indicated that they're just about ready to begin the vehicle count process, and then we'll move into the design phase. So it's running slower than originally planned, but we're still continuing to monitor it.
Very good. Thank you. Let's move on to the police chief's report.
Couple quick notes. February stats for you to look at, pretty consistent with most months. Nasty weather and the move into 661. So if you have any questions on those, please let me know. Second, officers Noble and Snyder will be attending the academy here April 15th, I believe. Getting one step closer to having full certified staff. So looking forward to that. Today we had our first training, at least that I can remember, where we sponsored it, hosted it, had it at a facility that was owned and operated by us, which was a nice change. So we were able to do some training on recognizing and responding to mental health calls for law enforcement. Thought it was a good training. So hopefully in the future we'll be doing some more of those. But we've never had that capability, and it's nice to have it now.
Thank you. All right. We're going to switch up the agenda a little bit. I want to start, before we go into any discussion of the bond, go down to 3258 Charlestown Utility Board Oversight. And this was put on the agenda on the behest of myself and certainly Councilman Brittingham. I certainly have some very real concerns the way the utility board is being run. and it gives me great concern. Additionally, I had requested some documents several weeks ago. I wanted every letter that has my name on it to be sent by the utility to me. That has not been done. That has not been responded to. I began thinking as well as we went through this Rockwell issue, I believe that information is being withheld. I believe the council is the oversight body for CTUB, has a right to look at every single document, every email, any phone logs, anything related to the Rockwell project. I want CTUB to turn over to this city council so that we can, in a confidential manner, review every document associated with this project.
I would add that the mayor had CC'd me on adding this agenda item in an email to the city manager, Mr. Hennessy. When he did, I informed the mayor of another issue that I was having separately that he wasn't aware of at the time, and asked that it be included on this agenda item, and that is that Jefferson County Vision, the group that's here this evening that we're all familiar with, had made a FOIA request to CTUB back in December. I know some of us have been CC'd on those requests and emails. Mostly the questions were pertaining to why those requests were taking so long to complete for the FOIA that they had asked for. Once they received that information, the FOIA request back, there were a lot of documents that were exempted from it. Steptoe and Johnson apparently took about a month and a half to go through the documents, figure out what needed to be exempt. As we came to light with the legal memo, there's an associated email chain that certainly seems like it should have fallen under that FOIA request and does not. It had no reason why that document should have been exempted from that FOIA request, and it subsequently has been turned over to them. Because of that, I asked the city manager if city council would be able to review all of the exempted documents from that Jefferson County FOIA request. I think it's extremely appropriate given the fact that now we know that there was a document that should have been turned over that wasn't, and I wanted to see if there were any other documents that probably should have not been exempted and turned over. The city manager informed me that he had passed that request along multiple times, and Mr. Hennessy, correct me if I get any of the details or your correspondence incorrect, but I believe that the way that played out is that his request kind of fell on deaf ears. I repeated my request a couple more times, not only in person but via email to Mr. Hennessy. He once again attempted to get those documents for me. He didn't see any reason why I shouldn't be allowed to view those documents. I told Mr. Hennessy that if Charlestown Utility Board had any concern that those documents would not remain private if they were passed on to me or any other city council member, that I could certainly sit up in an office and review those documents on paper. Once again, that fell on deaf ears. I believe CTUB reached out to their attorneys, not only Hoy Shingleton, but also Steptoe and Johnson, neither of which are prepared to make an opinion as to whether or not this city council can review documents that CTUB has apparently in their possession that won't be submitted to the city council. So I see a clear problem with that. SB 234 clearly states that we are the regulatory body of CTUB and oversight body of CTUB, and yet I'm supposed to sit here and make a decision this evening on a $16 million bond, and I can't get documents from our own utility board.
Is there anybody who would like to add to this?
I just got a question. I mean, you're the chairman of the board for CTUB, right?
I am.
So can you comment on this?
Well, in terms of in terms of CTUB, what I can tell you is, CTUB hasn't talked about this as a board. So I think in a conversation that I'd had with Jane, that if it was council's desire to seek the documents, that we would put it on the CTUB agenda for the upcoming meeting. We would present it to the board and make sure that they understood at least what council's request was. I was mostly working this issue on behalf of the city council as the city manager. So again, this is where being the city manager and being the utility board chair is a little bit in conflict. But as the councilman said, we have been trying to get to the issue of, if council looks at the documents, does it waive the privilege that exists at the moment? And we've not been able to get any of the council at the moment to weigh in as to whether or not that's the case. It's my understanding kind of the next step is that we intend to go to the West Virginia Bar Association. They have an ethics board panel, whatever, see if they could help us in some respect. The final thing I will say is this, that if we were not in conflict with the utility board, if not opposed, let me just say that. If council and the utility board were not opposed, and there was not a conflict between the positions of the two, then I think we could get a legal decision. But at the moment, I'm not sure that there's not some opposition to turning over the documents. So, like I said, that's an issue I think we have to sort through with the utility board as well. The legal issue, again, we've been trying to get an answer to that. We just don't have a better answer than what the councilman described.
So I'm trying to understand what the conflict is between the city council and the utilities, right? I mean, because we do have oversight. If we requested, that's what I guess, just trying to understand. I'm not trying to be
no, I mean,
ointment here.
So it fundamentally gets to the question of how independent is the Charlestown Utility Board. We've got Article 147 that basically says that they shall administer the day-to-day, the management, the operations of the utility board, and that there are certain items that the council has some control over, like rates, bonds, property, I think was another one. I mean, there's a list of 5 issues that are specifically still within council's purview, and we've talked a little bit about those in the past. So like I said, I mean, there are certain things that council is empowered to do. Council definitely created the utility board through Article 147, but the question that the lawyers are having is how independent is the utility board from Charlestown City Council? And I need a lawyer to help me answer that question.
So, to that point, are you saying that we need to move this forward in order to go to a next step to get that opinion? Because that's where my concern lies too. If in doing this request and they agree where the privilege is waived, potentially, and we don't have an answer to that question, but are you saying moving this request forward would get us an answer to that question before it actually happened? We would be making a request. In that case, the utility board could then look at it and say, yes or no, we feel this would waive our privilege, and we could move forward with it that way? Or I'm trying to understand whether the better option is to move it forward to get more answers to that question, or to table it because we want to get more clarity on that before we do it.
My understanding is what probably gets us closer to the answer is a determination that the council and CTUB are not in opposition to each other. They do not oppose you looking at it, and you agree that you'll keep it confidential. And I think we just have to get to that point to then get the council, hopefully, to then weigh in with a decision.
All right, I'll move we table this item to the following city council meeting after the vote on item 3252.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, 5. All the nays?
I think we skipped discussion.
It seems like.
Sorry.
Yeah, you moved a motion, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I was going to say you didn't move. Well, you moved a table.
Moved to table and seconded.
Right, and there's, again, debate. Motion to table is not debatable.
Yeah.
There we go, that's right. Okay. So again, I just want to make sure I had the vote.
Yes.
Nays have voted yet.
Nays haven't
there you
voted yet. So against?
No.
Okay.
So that's
against.
2 noes.
Yep.
So Brittingham, Tolbert, no, and the rest are yes. Okay.
All right, let's move on to 3252, second reading, final consideration of the public sewer system ordinance.
Okay.
Well, certainly I would say that I don't understand how the city council could move on this item with a yay or a nay vote this evening, considering we just learned that there are documents that the Charlestown Utility Board has in their possession related to this controversy and this bond ordinance that they are refusing to provide to the city council. Why we would then vote on a $16 million bond for their project, it's beyond me.
May I ask, what are we looking for as far as these documents?
I have no idea. I haven't seen them.
So it's just the proper way to address this is, I think we have to first take it off the table to have a discussion about the bond itself, or the ordinance itself.
The ordinance, yeah. So we need to keep this now.
You need a motion to remove from the table.
Yeah.
All right, I'll move we remove from the table.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
So 2 in opposite, okay, right? Okay. So the main motion is back on the floor, right? And the main motion is the lease ordinance.
All right,
Fully debatable.
fully debatable.
Fully debatable.
All right, does anybody want to start?
All right, so just so I'm clear, so then the motion and the second from across the street now applies, correct? Or do we have to redo that?
So the main motion that's on the table is basically the second reading and the final consideration of an ordinance authorizing
okay.
the construction and then the leasing of the property from the building commission, and among other items.
I'll make a motion that we approve.
Well, we don't have to. The main motion is on the floor, so it's.
We're in the discussion.
So now we're further discussion.
We're
Okay.
discussion.
I would remind the city council that this council is currently seeking a utility attorney. The RFP is out. We are searching for an attorney that can actually advise us on these matters. Right now, we can't even get a clear answer on whether or not we're allowed to see documents that our own utility board has relating to this topic. I would certainly suggest, and I think I can make the motion to table after we've just untabled.
A little discussion before we table it.
Yeah, I think that was
course.
my point.
I'm just asking for,
You
Have
want-
a chance to.
I just want to have a little bit more talk to see where everyone is.
Absolutely. I would just say that we're currently waiting on a utility attorney.
Correct.
This seems to be what will probably go down as the most important utility decision that this city council ever makes. And so it just seems reckless to me that we would make that decision as we're searching for a utility attorney, but prior to finding one.
But let's clarify the issue, though. The issue is how to fund the Route 9 sewer system. That's the issue before the council, right?
Yes.
So I'm not opposed to the utility council, and I understand why, we want that. But I mean, it's to me, and I've talked to a lot of different people, and I know all of us have, and really, we've all kind of shared the same dilemma or fix or whatever you want to call it. It just seems like we can do the 5-5 route. That will most definitely be a rate increase to the customers right now. Or we can do the state-sponsored money, which I think kind of puts maybe our building commission in a little bit of a situation, and it ameliorates the impact to the rate holders, or excuse me, the ratepayers on the whole project. So I think if we vote for the bond, that means we're saying, okay, let's move forward to the building commission whether or not they want to do the bond vote whenever they do that. If we vote no, then we move ahead with the 5-5 thing. And I think that's what we're voting for here. And I think we need to be clear of what those two things entitle. And I really respect the 1,015 folks who signed the petition. I looked at that petition. Obviously, I couldn't sign it. I read it. But nowhere in that petition does it say, if we do the 5-5, it doesn't mean that Rockwool doesn't build a plant up there. It doesn't mean that the 21-story smokestacks are not going to be there, and all the other issues that are legitimate issues, I think, that the people have brought up over the past few months are not going to happen. And also, if we do the 5-5, and I'm not necessarily opposed to this, but we have to go in there with our eyes wide open, that will equate to a rate increase to the ratepayers in the sewer system. And I think the other thing that I've been struggling with this whole time, and maybe some of you can share the same thing, is does the utility control zoning? I say that the utility cannot control zoning. The zoning of that particular customer is not up to this body. This body's vote is how we're going to pay for this sewer system.
Anyone?
I think Mr. Trainer's right on the money.
Thank you, Councilman Hines. I would like to, if I could, talk a little bit about our building commission holding these bonds. I think one of the things that we haven't discussed enough is what does that mean about Charlestown's growth in the future? We're asking our building commission to hold bonds on development in another city in a county outside of our urban growth boundary, what does that mean for our building commission? What does that mean for our debt rating? What does that mean if in the future, for future growth in Charlestown, that someone comes to us and says, the best thing for Charlestown is to have your building commission to hold the bonds for growth in your community, but now we can't do that because we're holding the bonds for Ranson's growth.
Can I ask, because I did get your email on that topic, where are you getting your information that they are limited to the amount of bonds that they can hold, and this would prevent some future?
Well, generally, I'm going off, I have actually worked in bonds before, and generally, you're not given a carte blanche to continue to hold bond after bond after bond. I do believe we are, but there are limits. Now, what they are, do we know today? No, we don't.
Back when we first considered this, that was one of our major concerns, and we had Mr. Hennessy look into that, and we were told that this would not limit their ability to do that.
Right,
Now, it happened 8 months ago, so.
Well, I disagree strongly with that assertion, that it would limit.
Well, because it's linked to the revenue of the line, which makes it a different bond than just a regular building bond.
And further, this bond, this type of, and it's an exotic financial instrument. It's never been tried. It's never been tested in court. We don't know what's going to happen 10 years down the line. I can guarantee I don't trust the state of West Virginia for anything in this world. I have no doubt that down the line that they will try to come back and collect their money when it doesn't pay off. This is a very serious issue here. You know, we're talking about doing business with people, which is what we're talking about here. We're talking about doing business with people, whether it's Rockwell, whether it's the JCDA, whether it's the State Development Authority. I don't trust these people. Why am I going to do business, put Charlestown assets on the line for people I don't trust and don't have the best interests of the people at heart? Now, again, I'm going to go on. Hooking them up to our sewer is an entirely different matter. That very well, we may find out we have to do it. Holding the bonds for development outside of Charlestown, we have no business. We should not be a part of it. This whole project has lacked transparency, clarity. Straight from the first day it came out here, it's been hidden. We've been lied to. Some of the own attorneys who came to this very place are conflicted. They should not have been giving us legal advice on the bond. The information we have got is incorrect, and I'll be looking to make some serious complaints, legal complaints about some of the advice we've received here. So you have to ask yourself, Rockwell has certain vested rights. They do. We have certain rights. We have no business being involved in this project at all, except for the utility statutory, potentially statutory obligations to hook them up. We should vote this bond down, table it, get rid of it.
We do run into issues all the time because of our outdated charter, and the ordinance committee is working right now to try to update our charter. We have a question out and have for about a month with the city attorney, Michael Funk, about the options, because there are different options to amend the charter. One of the problems is coming up now. Section 21 of the Powers of Council says that we can't even approve these bonds. Section 21 says that the powers of the city council are to issue bonds of the corporation and make sale thereof, but no such bond shall be sold by said corporation for less than par, nor bearing a higher rate of interest than 6% per annum, nor shall said corporation be indebted on account of such issue at any period in a greater sum than $10,000 without the consent of a majority of the voters of the town expressed at an election held for that purpose. And that's exactly what we're doing here. And while, yes, I recognize that this city already holds bonds in excess of $10,000, that doesn't mean it was done properly, and certainly that's not legal precedent to continue doing it once you realize that you're in violation of your own charter. And so approving these bonds would once again be violating our own charter.
I'll just throw in my 10 cents, I guess, and I'll just pick on the people here. So one of my main concerns is the aspect of rates. All right. So currently, right now, Councilmember Trainer, Councilmember George, Councilmember Brittingham, and Mayor Rogers. Currently, and I didn't bring my stub, but currently, you guys are paying approximately 30-ish% higher sewer rates than Councilmember Ann, Chet, Todd, Michael, and myself, okay? So over the course of the next 10 years, all right, we have to equalize our rates. History has shown us we don't equalize rates by decreasing them, okay? So you're paying your 30% higher sewer rates. Once consolidation occurs, we're not even at Rockwell yet, okay? Our rates are going up to equalize. That's how that works. People versus Hunfield, that's how that happened, okay? My rates didn't go down when the sewer project was completed. Ann's went up, Chet's went up. That's how we equalize. That's how it works. Not to mention, not to pick on Mr. Trainer, Mr. George, you're facing a 2.5% tax. Welcome to the city of Charlestown during the, when we're dealing with the consolidation. All right? Then you bring in Rockwell, that's rate increases on all of us. And that's including Locust Hill, that's including Tuscaloosa, that's including the ratepayers. So that is my concern. Again, we didn't sign up for this, Ranson did, but it's something that we have to deal with. Regardless of the outcome of this vote, no one wins tonight. No one wins tonight. Okay? We either lose this way or we lose that way, but nobody wins. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you mind if I respond to a couple of things you said?
Sure.
I would say, one, yes, you're right. We've been talking for about 8 months now about this estimated 42-cent rate increase. Now, number one, we determined in, I think it was December, that that's only if the current project is built utilizing the 5.5, but not if Rockwell builds their own project that only services themselves that leads to no rate increase or an undetermined rate increase. However, we've been sitting here for 8 months debating this 42 cents. It's not a 2.5% tax that we currently impose because of consolidation. It was a 2% tax, which we found out was 50 cents per 1,000 gallons. So it's actually more than this 42 cents that we've been debating for 8 months. And we did that without blinking an eye. We were told by CTUB that it was mandated by the state. We later found out it's not mandated by the state. It's something that this city council has done by ordinance, and that we are allowed to impose up to 2%, but we don't have to impose any if we don't want to. We found that out last month, and yet we're not revisiting that. We all just shrugged that off, and we're not even revisiting the fact that there was a 50 cent per 1,000 gallon rate increase last month. But for 8 months, we've been debating about 42 cents. Additionally, you're right. This is Ranson that put this on our plate. The Charlestown Building Commission is not CTUB, and I don't see any reason why Ranson's Building Commission can't fund this project and these bonds for CTUB. Anybody can fund this and create a lease agreement with CTUB. It's not that our building commission has to do it. So yeah, you're right. If it's Ranson's project, they've already spent $1.5 million that they currently have on their books, not our books. They can bond the project and pay themselves back.
Good. And again, just to quickly note on the 42 cents, we don't know if that's exactly what it's going to be.
And if you recall, I didn't bring up 42 cents. I just, because I personally, I'm not a mathematician and know that exact number at all. I believe, based on all the spreadsheets and all the data and all this stuff, that we are looking at some sort of increase. There are things that we have to account. If the financing doesn't go through, we have to address the upfront cost of $300,000 and some odd that we have to pay immediately. Where does that money come from? We have Mr. Ross brought up the credit line. That has to be addressed as well. And it's got to come from somewhere, So I understand what you're saying, but, my points didn't really bring up the Building Commission. I'm not sure what that has to do with the rates, but, that's just where I am, And as far as the 2.5% tax, I believe that's what it was, and we pushed it a month so we can tell everybody about it at least. But I wasn't made aware that it didn't change. I don't know. Did you get your bill? I don't know.
Not yet. So just to make a clarification, in the ordinance meeting, Darrell, we're talking about sewer and water tariffs. Is that tax part of that discussion?
No, that's not. That's the item on the agenda for the referral to the Finance Committee. I've said referral of fees and tax policies.
Yep.
And one of the tax policies is the utility tax.
So just to clarify,
Yeah.
we're definitely still talking about that. That's not a dead issue.
Well, yeah, assuming that council refers it to you for
Right.
consideration.
There you go.
Yeah. Yep.
which more than likely, we're hoping they will. But again, I just say that if we do what the request from our customer up there is saying, so yeah, you're right, that costs us about $300-something thousand. That's our part. There's $1 million with the planning, that's our responsibility as well. But then the improvements with the PSD system that we inherited, that's going to cost some money as well. So I just want to, if we're going to vote no for this thing, if everybody's going to vote no, just bear in mind, there is going to be rate increases. I mean,
Well, Bob, I think you're right on that, because I do want to make something clear. If Rockwell never came here, Floating Springs would have led to a rate increase. If you look at the initial project that was approved by the PSD, which in my view was an incredible giveaway to developers, would have led to, especially for PSD customers, a considerable increase. Now, they thought, obviously, that they could put the two projects together with Rockwell and PSD and maybe save some money. They may save some money, but no matter what route we take, there will be some level of an increase. I would personally rather that these be done separately and that we go back and look at the Flowing Springs project entirely, because I think it was a giveaway. I think it was going to cost way too much, and as a person who had been a customer of PSD, I was always very opposed to the Flowing Springs project.
It's kind of illogical, though, if you just run however many miles that is up to the orchards and you don't tie in the rest of it. It's illogical to do it. It's going to cost more money. I agree with you, by the way, and I thought about that if we never had this Route 9 sewer thing was part of it, in our consolidation, we'd still inherit a lot of costs. But when we were doing consolidation, that was always on the table. That was always part of the planning, is how we were going to ameliorate those costs to clean up the PSD system infrastructure.
Right,
Again,
and
I'm sorry, no, I'm good.
And to that point, I think that everybody's forgotten that's where we started, because we've been doing this for 8 months, that this is inextricably tied to plans for consolidation and was always part of that. And that's where I have a real issue here. It sounds very good to say, let's build Rockwell its own line and, make them pay for it, which isn't actually true. That's one of the frustrations that I'm feeling, that after all these months and months of doing our best to try to educate the public about what's involved, it still seems to be that I got emails as soon as today that said, I don't want the taxpayers paying for this. I shouldn't have to have my taxpayer dollars make Rockwell pay for it. Well, those aren't the two choices we're facing. That's a vast oversimplification of what we are considering. It's true, ma'am. It's an oversimplification. If we need to go over that, let's go over it again so that we better understand it. Then that's fine, and we can have that discussion. But the way I see it is we're looking at two unappealing options, and the way to assess it from the point of what Mr. Traynor said is, which of those options offers the least amount of risk to the city, to the citizens, and to the ratepayers? And that is what I think we need to use in our decision-making process. And if we go back to consolidation where I started, before I got a little rattled and off page, is to continue to build these single-user, single-pump station lines, which is the crux of the PSD system that we were trying to solve and better manage, is repeating our same mistakes as far as sanitary sewer in this county goes. The idea is, the pit stop is here at Charlestown, but the idea long-term is a real regional utility system. These are good goals. These are good goals. And first shot out of the box after consolidation, we're going to say, and we're going to continue to support the single-user line with the single-user pump station and continue to have this very disjointed, dysfunctional system where you have duplicate infrastructure running side by side in the ground. And I just think I just want to throw that out there because I think we've forgotten that piece. That's what this was supposed to be about initially.
Now, I add too, with the consolidation, one of the biggest worries was that Charlestown would try to control development through the utility. That was a big issue, and I'm pretty sure it says in our ordinance that is not what we do with the utility. And I even think that's against state code, but I'm not 100% sure of that. But we can't control planning with the utility. It's,
No, and I agree with you, Bob. I think you're 100% right with that. My main issue, as we've gone through, is I'm troubled by Charlestown holding the bonds for a project that's in another city and is taking place outside of our urban growth boundary. I see no reason for our building commission to be involved in this. Now, we can go back. There's a lot of information that was withheld for us, not only through consolidation, but for months, and even to this day, our utilities withholding information from us. The reality is, for me, is right. You're right. If they come in with a valid option to hook up, I suspect we'll have to hook them up. We don't need to pay for it. We don't need to be part of this project at all. That is not.
But Mr. Mayor, we're not paying for it.
Yeah, they're paying for it with our tax dollars. People seem to forget this. This is not free money.
Well, just a minute, though. It gets paid back by the users of that sewer system, which is Rockwell.
Ultimately, well, it depends where you believe it. I do not believe that ultimately the end user will ever pay off. I think they're going to be left owing lots of money on it, and I suspect the state will come back sometime in a long time in the future and ask for that money back.
Okay, but, so let's get back to that and kind of try to confirm that we're all on the same page here, because what you just said is not how I understand the bond funding to work. So I think it is accurate to say that it is taxpayer financed, absolutely. Funded, no. The bond is paid back over a period of 25 years by the net revenues of the new users on the line. Have I said anything that's not correct? Over a 25-year period. The funding as proposed for the state is that if that is not sufficient amount of money in a 25-year period to pay off that bond, then that loan will be forgiven at that time.
Please.
I understand that, okay? So, but under 5.5, correct me if I'm wrong, there is a portion of upfront costs that our utility board will have to fund a portion of that line. It is not a Rockwell-only paid-for line. Over time, the gross revenues of that line will go back to pay Rockwell back. Meanwhile, we will also be out the costs of operation and maintenance over that period of time. So just want to make sure people understand, like you said, if you're going to go one direction, there's some mess and some risk and some cost associated with it. I'm not saying there isn't risk and cost associated with both options, but we need to be clear about what those options are. And it's frustrating when I believe this council's very legitimate, honest goal from the beginning was to give all of you an option to hear what we were considering, understand all of the information, have your voices heard, and I think we've tried to do that, but it's very frustrating to be at this point and still feel like there's so much misinformation. That's just a frustration I feel I want to express.
I get your frustration, but the misinformation is not coming from those people. It's coming from the state and our own utility board. At the same point, I mean, I don't think anybody on this council is going to make the argument that we can violate our own city charter, correct? It's black and white. Section 21, powers of council say that we can't approve bonds more than $10,000. We need to correct it. I would make a motion
But we're not approving a bond.
What's that?
We're not approving a bond.
Agreed. Building
You're
commission's
not,
not going to
yes.
be able to do it either. Building commission derives their power from us. So are we going to allow the building commission to violate our charter? Because I watched the last building commission meeting, and those guys, they don't know what to do, honestly. I see them over there, and they're desperately looking for us for guidance because they have no desire to be in the situation that we've put them in. And Ms. Panessa, you were there with me, and I think you would agree that they absolutely will do anything that we tell them to do because they don't know what to do. And once again, they were counseled not by their attorneys, not by the city's attorneys, but by the Charlestown Utilities Board's attorneys during that meeting, just like we always are. ordinance committee can take a look at this. We've already got it out there to Steptoe and Johnson on the ways to update our charter. We can come back fairly quickly with how to update it, but there is an issue, an outstanding issue, that this would violate our charter.
With all due respect, you can't cherry pick what's wrong with the charter, because there's a lot more that's
Oh,
wrong
agreed.
with the charter that's superannuated, because it hasn't been really addressed. The election is a perfect example of that. So what's the option, though? You go 5-5, and then...
And then what?
And we don't even know how much 5-5 costs. We're still
Right.
waiting on CTUB's analysis of 5-5.
Could I say something on that? They're going to have that on the 22nd from Chat Hester. That's when they're going to report it. And then they're going to give it to Rockwell, and then I guess Rockwell will make a decision on where they're going to move forward. So, yeah.
And I believe we do understand, based on their projected flows, how much the upfront's going to be, and it's going to be approximately $350,000.
Correct.
Plus the $1 million.
Plus, I'm sorry,
Spent on-
Councilman Trainer, plus the $1 million.
Again, it's all dependent on what they decide to do.
It's a lot of risk.
Well, I think,
Okay,
you're talking about the $1 million of Ranson's?
The soft cost for the engineering project.
Well, I think there's some level, and that might need to be litigated, whether we have any,
We could litigate
Yeah.
that, correct.
and I think we should litigate it.
I don't see how, to be honest with you. At first, I thought that, but I don't see how. It's a legitimate cost for the project.
I don't think Ranson wants to go through the discovery process, to be honest. I don't think Rockwell would ever want to go through the discovery process.
So when we signed the ordinance to consolidate with Ranson, we basically took the utilities and everything that went with it.
But we even have John Stump saying that he didn't adequately explain that to us. He did his mea culpa right at that very table over there. And again, I think we need to go back, and this will be for another day, look at the legal counsel that we've received throughout this entire process, because I have some real problems with it. Again, I think things have been hidden through us throughout this entire process. I have found more out about this whole Rockwell thing from FOIA requests than I have from getting information from our own utility board, from Ranson. They simply will not give you information. You have to try to pry it out of them. There's still a lot of FOIA requests going on with the Development Authority. I'd love to see some more of that information come out. I would love to see information coming out from the secret meeting at the Bavarian Inn that was done out of the public view, that lacked transparency, probably illegal, certainly unethical, and certainly not appropriate. I do not have enough information for me to make a vote in the affirmative to either for the bond or to put this line in. This information, you don't do business with people who don't give you the information that you need to make your decisions, and do so in a very proactive manner.
But I think the issue tonight is not whether we're going to put in the sewer line. The issue is how we're going to pay for it. So this vote is whether we're going to use the state funding to do it, and if the state, the financing, thank you, that will be paid back, or if we're going to do 5-5. That's the issue right now, because we've already have a letter from Rockwell says, per law, we want to have this sewer line. We have to provide it. So, but I'm ready to vote.
Well, Mike Tolbert?
Everybody finished?
Well, I was just going to say a few more things about, on the 22nd, we do get the estimate back, give it to Rockwell. They could decide either to build the only Rockwell line or to go the other option, which is the full build-out. And some may believe that if they go the Rockwell-only line, that will delay them a year from actually building the plant. No, that's not true, because they are planning to pump and haul any sewage that they want to do, and they could do that ad nauseum. I mean, forever, whenever they want to do it till. Or they could build the full build-out, and they could have that sooner. So that's all I wanted to say.
Well, everybody's finished, because you know I'm long. I just want to, before I do, I just want to touch upon that issue of Ranson and the $1 million, and try to address my part of it in there. But in this point, I agree with you. Ranson did make that information known to our utility board. It's clear that they did. Our utility board used that information and they knew about it. The problem that I have and have always had is that during the due diligence process by which when this council, both this council and the ordinance committee met with CTUB and the attorneys for CTUB on multiple occasions, that was not disclosed. That is the thing. The entire concept of due diligence is to address those issues that if they ever come back to bite you, you at least know about it. And that is my problem. So I do think the issue of the $1 million and the rent is not our issue with Ranson. It may be our issue with the law firm that did not provide us with that due diligence issue. So,
The irony of that whole thing is, I agree with you, by the way, it's very disconcerting to say the least, but the irony of that thing, had they let us know that, we would have probably had still consolidated with Ranson. That's the thing.
But
They should have disclosed it. I agree with you.
and I think, everybody knows who makes up the ordinance committee.
Right.
And I think we would have insisted that there would be a provision in this agreement to hold us harmless if this thing went sideways. And that's where my issue, because I think the folks on the ordinance committee would have said, oh, no way. You may think this is going to go through, but things can always go south, and
At least we would have been able to ask the question.
So, with that, let me give you a rough rundown on where I came up with this, and I'm not going to do a couple other issues, but I'm just going to go to the options. Daryl, if you could pull that up, but if you could go to the
Go back where?
second page. Yes.
My eyes.
That one, yes. And open it up.
Yeah, I'm trying to type. Here?
Yes. Oh, wait a minute, excuse me. Yeah, next page. That one, okay. I have probably talked more about SB 234 than I have talked about vacant structures since I've been on this council. I know a little bit about it, and I've read it a couple of times. And what I've tried to do is go through it and pull a couple things out of it. And the first one is, kind of goes to, in SB 234, it says what the Public Service Commission does. And basically, it is charged with the responsibility of appraising and balancing the interest of current and future utility service customers. Okay, that's what they do. Now, also within SB 234 is the provision that we all talk about. And sometimes I think the way in which to describe this whole process, I've been looking for a word that covers everything, is the word giddy. Because at the beginning of this, everyone was giddy. There was this new project that was coming. State was going to provide funding and all like that. Everybody was giddy. But giddy has some downsides. Everyone within SB 234 said, well, the legislature finds that water and sewer utilities that are political subdivisions of the state providing separate or combined services and having at least 4,500 customers and annual gross revenue of $3 million or more are most fairly and effectively regulated by the local governing body with respect to three things: rates, borrowing, and capital projects. Now, the 4 years I've been on this council, I've wanted fire hydrants, I have had issues with water testing. I've had a lot of issues with CTUB, but I have never said, you are going to do this or else. I have never threatened them, because the only authority that I have over them to regulate them, I believe, is with rates, borrowing, and capital projects. And I think I've been true to that. But being true to that, when you take these two paragraphs together, here's where I come out on this. And I think, Bob, it's going to go to your zoning issue. And I rewrote this and said, the West Virginia legislature charges the Charlestown City Council with the responsibility for appraising and balancing the interest of current and future Charlestown, Ranson, and former PSD utility service customers. The legislature finds via SB 234 that the Charlestown City Council is more equipped to fairly and effectively regulate the Charlestown Utility Board with respect to rates, borrowing, and capital projects. And that's where I see this. We do not control zoning. We have no authority to alter zoning, and I have some questions about how things got the way they were. Just recently, last night, I sent out an email asking about a zoning issue. But I don't believe we have any authority to alter any zoning in any municipality or in the county. But we do have the authority, I do believe, to monitor and, as it said, appraise and balance the interest of current utility service customers. It is not simply that someone can just simply come to us and say, we're putting a development in, we want sewer, you are going to provide it. We have to make that decision. So within the context of our utility, we get to make some decisions based upon balancing the interests. Is it too far away? Does it cost too much money? Are there issues that we can't accommodate you, and thus you're going to have to build your own sewer system, or we're going to say no? So I'm coming at it from that last paragraph, and I agree with you on the zoning issue.
Those reasons that you mentioned are legitimate reasons, the cost, too far, that kind of stuff. I think that's where it kind of ends, though.
Yeah,
right?
And I think the thing with SB 234 is that everyone has been thinking that they think that SB 234 allows our utility board to not have to go to the Public Service Commission in Charleston. And that relieves them of a lot of costs, a lot of resources, and all like that. Yes, that's been the thinking, but the other side of that is that it also gave powers normally that the PSC would have to the city council. And in the future, you're going to have, I'm going to be leaving in a couple of months, but in the future, the city council will have many projects that are going to come before it that this utility would normally have sent down to the city, to the Public Service Commission, that we're going to have to deal with. And so we've got to sort some of this out and understand, no, we don't deal with zoning. But we do deal with balancing and appraising growth in the county and how to provide utility and water service to it. And ultimately, we're going to have to deal with stormwater in this county. So that's where I'm coming from, this last paragraph.
But you're not saying that it's our job through the utilities to control growth in the county, right? Okay.
No. Now, I have some personal opinions.
Me too.
Yeah, but I...
All do.
Really,
Yeah,
Bob?
but I don't think we have, and I don't think we should. Those are the responsibilities of the county and the municipalities. Daryl, could you go to the second page? Next page. Oh, excuse me. Yes, okay, well, here is the skipping along and adding to the thing of the Giddy. Here it is. This is where the West Virginia Infrastructure and Development Council is seeking to establish a 1,000-acre industrial park in West Virginia's eastern panhandle. In support of this goal, Ranson and Jefferson County Development Authority negotiated an agreement to bring Roxel, a manufacturer of cement-based insulation materials, to a 150-acre site on the 390-acre Jefferson Orchards property. known as the Orchard. The Orchard was annexed into Ranson in 2004 and lies just north of Ranson's urban growth boundary. Now, I have questions about that, but honestly, I can't do anything about that. That is an issue that Ranson has, and that's also an issue I think we may find out that the county has to deal with.
So are you familiar with the 1,000-acre area then?
I am.
How is that 1,000 acres zoned right now, and what jurisdiction is it in? I don't mean to put you on the spot. I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
No, according to the, if you remember, on the next page, Daryl.
Seth, do you know the answer to the zoning up in that area by chance? Or? Yeah, maybe if you could look for that.
Well, I asked this question back in February. Where were those 1,000 acres? And CTUB said, legitimately, we don't deal with those issues. You should ask Ranson, or you should go ask the Jefferson County Development Authority. And I left it at that. I knew I wasn't going to get an answer, so kind of dropped it. And then it shows up in the paper, the Journal, and then last week it shows up in the Spirit of Jefferson. Well, what did they say? They asked Ranson. Ranson said, well, the part of that they are, that 1,000 acres was the Orchard site, I guess both portions of the Orchard site, the Miller property, which is actually in the county, and then Tackley Farm, which is across the street from or near the industrial park. And I think there was another slice of it. So there were parts of it that were also in Ranson, and there were parts of it that were in the county. Well, if you look at the county zoning map, and you look at Ranson's zoning map, it's not, neither of them are zoned for industrial. And as we know, Rockwell got here when Ranson used its smart code to change its zoning of that parcel to allow heavier industry in that area.
110 acres, or was it all 329 acres up there, do you know?
I think just 110, Ann?
Yeah, just the property that Roxel purchased, not the entire.
Okay, so that's the only area that's zoned for industrial right now.
Well, yes, and it was zoned in the space of a meeting of Ranson. If you look at, if you look at the comprehensive plan of the county, not there.
No,
You look at
got it.
Shepherdstown and Bolivar's.
I got it.
Heavy industry does not show up in any of these comprehensive plans.
But I just want to know, because you've done the research, exactly what's zoned for industrial, what's the potential to be zoned for industrial that's in Ranson and then outside in the county. Because certainly, I would think that the citizens of this county would certainly have a say in rezoning those areas that aren't rezoned at this part.
Looking at the property that is surrounding the Rockwell site, it is zoned rural in the county. Not to say that it could not be rezoned, but then what happened in Ranson with their smart code is they changed it to something called special district. Now, clearly, you're wondering, what is special district and how does that relate to heavy industrial? You almost sort of have to think of that as a district. You can sort of craft what you want to do in it. In the smart code, special district almost acknowledges there's no way to make pretty the general commercial corridors, so that's what it was originally intended for. It's always going to be auto-centric. It's always going to be a little garish. You're not going to have buildings up at the front. They're not going to be beautiful architecture, so you created a spot for that called special district. In turn, you need to have communities that are going to have industrial, even if they have smart code. So you put it in that special district zone, and that's what it's called, even if it doesn't say industrial, and that's what Rockwell has.
So, and that's the 100 acres, right?
Yeah, that's the 100
thereabouts.
acres. Correct, that's right.
Okay. Is, just for curiosity, is the Home Depot and all that, is that in the special district as well?
They've rezoned their home city, so I mean, I could take a quick look.
I was just curious.
Sure. It would probably be appropriate to be that.
But it is, and before you go, Seth, would you give a general definition of, Because it's a question. What differentiates heavy industry from what normally people call light or medium industry?
Sure, I think once you take a material from one substance and convert it into something else, you've entered heavy industrial. So anytime you're really converting it, ore into steel, that's heavy industrial. That'd be sort of the definition. I mean, it's one thing to take stamped steel and convert it into, maybe hoods, but, once you convert it from two different materials, that's pretty heavy.
And so you have Burr, to Burr Park, which basically is light to medium industry. You don't have a heavy industry.
We define that in our guidance to the JCDA representative.
So, continuing on with my concept of Getty, this is the document, and I left the colors alone. It is CTUB's green. This is the document that they had to send to the state in order to deal with talk about the repayment of how they would repay the loan. The first column is important because during that period of Getty, a year or so ago, there were estimates of what the daily and annual flow would be from certain properties. And as you can see, say the first one is Blackford Village, where they estimated that there was going to be 109,000 gallons daily coming out of that property. Well, a year later, after Getty has kind of left the building, and we're now into reality, when you look at the actual estimate of what the Blackford Village would produce per day, possibly in 10 years after it's built out, it's 10,900 gallons. So if you go through this all, you'll find that many of these original estimates that are in the Hatch-Chester report are simply wrong. They are estimates, and they were high estimates, and they're wrong. And based upon that, there was an estimate during the Getty time that this line was going to cost $10.5 million. Now, the other thing you have to realize is that the green lines, right, as you see them in this thing, are the properties that CTUB is fairly confident, or that they have service agreements or letters from, that the developers or Shenandoah Junction or the school system will hook into these things. So they're obligated to provide service for these. But you can't provide service for the others because there are no agreements. They were just estimates, and they were just properties that fell along the line. So if you look on the front page, first page, and Daryl, could you go to that real quick? So, well, it's hard to see, but the first column down where it says, under realistic circumstances, what is defined in the green on that other page, there's only 53,000 gallons daily. That's real. There was the original estimate of 106,000 gallons for those 5 properties, Burr, Tackley, Jet, Shenandoah Junction, and Rockwool. We know that Rockwool has increased up to 46,000 gallons, but we're not going to argue that here. We're just going to use this document. If you go down to the properties that are in this document that will be sewer readied, where there is no service agreement, where went into the cost of this Getty, where there was a $10.5 million project. And remember, originally it was going to be $14 million. Then it upped to $16 million. And then it went to $10.5 million. Now it's around, well, it went to $10 million. Now it's 10.5. So this number has been everywhere. But if you look at all the gallons, the usage capacity that there's no service agreements for. There's no plan to put that on. And if you look in there, the time lag for putting this stuff online is at least 10 years, if it ever goes on at all. That's would have been 88,000 gallons per day. In the real world, when you add the greens up for those properties, or in the Chester report a year ago when everybody was giddy, this was 692,000 gallons that they were going to get $10.9 million or 16 or 14, whatever you want to do it. They were going to build a capacity system that would have carried all of this. Now, I think I've got this fairly right. I may be wrong in some parts of it, but, you know, I'm not using anyone else's documents. I'm using CTUB's documents, and they're documents that I kept asking for. So where I'm going with this is that this line is overbuilt, in some cases to the factor of 10. Now, last council meeting I gave y'all a chart, and I had 3 columns, and it's the very first page, and Daryl, yeah, same page. And it kept hitting me, and after a conversation with one of the council members, 2 of the council members, I thought to myself, you know, this is wrong. It's not scientific, because you have to baseline this. What CTUB tends to tell us is there are only 2 options. There is either the state financing, basically, or there is Rockwool only. Well, there's actually 4 options. And the very first option is, would we build this pipeline ourselves? Would we look at all of this and say that we, as the city of Charlestown, would build this pipeline without, just by itself? And the answer is no. Wouldn't even think about building something for the flows that would go through there that far out, that number of pump stations, that amount of pipe, for customers that may never get served, for capacity that may never get used. So the very first column here kind of represents what should be your baseline, which is, would we build this ourselves? And the answer is no. And from there, it's a little bit easier then to look at the whole project, look at the other options.
You wouldn't build it if you didn't have a customer.
So right.
Say, oh, that's kind of.
But would you build it with only Rockwool's 46,000 daily gallons and another 53,000 gallons, 5 miles of pipelines, 2 pump stations? Would we spend $10.5 million of our own money? In other words, would we put our own skin in the game and build this thing if our utility probably would not have ever brought a proposal like that to us? The only reason this pipeline is getting built is because Rockwool is at the end of it and there's state financing for it. But would we build it ourselves? Nah.
No, under 5.5, right?
If I could just add one thing, Mr.
Sure.
Stolber. Under 5.5, we would probably see if the state financing package didn't exist and this developer was just up at the north end of the county and asked us to do this, I would believe that CTUB would make an argument to the PSC that this wouldn't be financially feasible and we wouldn't do this. And so the only reason that we are really building it is because of the state financing. We wouldn't build this for Dan Ryan that long up at the north end of the county with that little amount of usage. We would make the argument that that wasn't feasible and we would do that in front of the PSC and try to argue our way. CTUB would try to argue their way not to build it.
It's hard to argue a negative, though, or prove a negative. But let's say there was a different customer up there. Let's say it was, I don't know, Amazon headquarters up there, and there was a state funding. Would we be saying, oh, we don't want to do the state funding, or there's some issues with the state funding?
I'm not even going to get to the state funding. All I want to establish first is that the baseline should always be, would you put your own money into it in the first place? Would we build it on our own? State funding is in the last column, and I'll talk about that. But the baseline should always be, are you going to put your own money into it, and would you build it yourself? And the answer to that, as I've kind of mapped at the bottom, is clearly no. There's no advantages in building this pipeline for that small number, whether it's industrial or residential, that far out into the county. It just isn't. So then column 2 is the so-called Rockwell-only plan. And there are 5 service agreements or 5 agreements in place. Under state law, we can't change state law. We have to serve them. Now, some people keep coming in and saying, no, this is only going to be a Rockwell-only line. This is only we're going to put in the smallest pipe, and we can only do this, and we can only do that. No. State law says there are only 4 ways to build a pipeline. Only 4. It's not 5. There's 4. And we have to serve because the utility says, the state says, if you're going to have that long a pipeline, then we're going to give other developers or whatever the opportunity to hook into that pipeline, and the proceeds from what those other folks pay goes to the developer, the person that puts in the pipeline. That's basically 5-5. So this Rockwell-only concept is really, it's not. Now, have someone tell you that with these service agreements in place, we're not going to serve them. We are. We have to. So the Rockwell-only line is if Rockwell were to finance this line itself, it would have to effectively negotiate. CTUB would effectively have to negotiate to put these 5, at least 5 users in it, and any other users that would come online like that. And as you can see, that's where I found actually the most advantages, and we can talk about those. Those are those little X's down below.
Little sidebar here.
Sure.
So let's say that's a mainline agreement modification or whatever. Once let's say that's negotiated, I don't know, you probably know this though. Let's say that's negotiated and they're like, yeah, okay, we'll do this. We'll hook you guys up. That still has to go through the PSC, right?
No. Because of SB 234, this council is the last authority on that. We get to decide.
So I've been told different, so that's something we should probably know.
I think that does have to go through the PSC, an alternative mainline extension.
Alternate mainlines. Okay.
It's fine. I just wanted to clarify that point.
That's fine. But the same thing goes. We have to provide service. And I think if you look on number I, on the next to the last page, excuse me, that's not number I, the one before it. Number G.
Letter G?
G. And this I pulled from our utility board, and it's the sewer system specifications, and it says CTUB hereby establishes the use of the alternative mainline extension agreement form Appendix C as the basic instrument to be used for all the CTUB developer agreements. The agreement format may be modified accordingly to fit unique projects with approval of CTUB. So one way or the other, whether it goes to the PSC or doesn't, there's only 4 ways to build a pipeline in West Virginia. And you have to provide service to those folks that have service agreements and have viable things.
So, Mike, you're saying that we should have a lot of capacity out in that area to take care of these people, right? So, but before that, you were saying that they were estimating too much input, let's say.
Yes.
Well, I mean, what's wrong with that? I mean, you want to be
There's
high.
nothing wrong with that, but if you normally negotiate, you build capacity into your your sewer system so that you can accommodate this. All I'm arguing is, Chet, that when the giddy period was upon us, Ranson, when it was putting in all of these things, and it spent $1 million to do the prep work and the design thing, it apparently gave Chester, however Chester came up with it, numbers that were in some cases 10 times what now CTUB says are the numbers for the daily flows. And that then expanded outward to a $10.9 million project that incorporates those excessive amount of flows into the thing and necessarily makes this project more expensive than it needs to be.
If it's free money, what difference does it make?
And that's a good question, and let me go on because number 4 deals with that. Option number 4, column number 4. Okay.
Just before you get to option number 4, so what is the cost then of the alternate mainline agreement? If the 10.5 is the estimate for using the state financing, what would be the cost for the alternate mainline agreement?
Well, first, I think the last meeting where Hoy was with us, Hoy had said that, number one, we weren't using a mainline agreement. We were using
By ordinance.
we were using by ordinance, but we'd have to use ordinances. And ordinance is not one of the 4 ways to put in a pipeline. It's just a mechanism for approving the pipeline.
No, I'm talking about your option 3.
Right.
Well, I mean, do we know what the cost of that one is?
No.
Okay.
And my recommendation is that we wait at least until the new analysis comes in of what this a 5.5 would look like with Rockwool, that we'll have hopefully now real numbers based upon daily flows.
But I think what they're working now is option 2, though. I mean, your option 2 here.
That would be, yes. That's my option. That would be option 2.
So it's not going to answer the alternate mainline agreement, which is option 3, right? I mean, my understanding is what the utilities is pursuing right now is just a line that serves Rockwool that ties into our system.
And that's where I have a lot of problems, Bob, because I have no clue how we're going to do that or how that will be done when there are 5 viable service agreements out there that state law says that we have to accommodate. How you build a Rockwool-only line, I still can't get an answer for that. I still don't understand that.
Would Rockwool be they would just be responsible, let's say it went the 5.5 route, whether it was alternate mainline or whatever, they would really only be responsible for funding their part of it, right? So all the other ones that you're talking about, the service agreements that you mentioned, and to kind of fix some of the other issues with the PSD existing infrastructure, that would come from the utilities. We would have to raise money to make do that infrastructure, right?
Well, according to, as far as I can tell by state law, those 5 service agreements,
right,
they would be responsible for hooking up and providing the things to hook into that. You know, the 5.5 is designed to say, 5.5, as I've been told many times, is a protector of the ratepayer.
But we would have to build in the capacity, I guess is what I'm saying.
There would be some, but that's what my argument is, that I think we need to wait at least until the numbers come in for the 5.5 analysis of a Rockwool line that they've requested, to find out what the actual numbers are going to be. Now, I want to skip over because this, if you remember, we've gone back and forth with John about these numbers. And then he provided this spreadsheet, and I didn't provide the second page, which was the 7.32 leak adjustment analysis, because John said that this wasn't the best one, that the best number, the best sheet to use was the 61% O&M number. And I don't agree with that, but I'm using what CTUB effectively said are their numbers. And I went back and confirmed with Daryl, who confirmed with CTUB, that they were standing by this. And it's got some issues, but if you look in the yellow at the end of the day, for an estimate of the $10 million that the state would give us, at the very end of this, in the year 2044, we would recoup all of $141,000. Now, there are issues, and the orange needs to be talked about over on to the right. But if you look at the standard line extension 5.5, if Rockville finances this thing, at the end of the day, this city will, or CTUB would recoup $14,534,000. I didn't make this up. Now, you can make some arguments about the orange, and they're going to come back and say, well, that's going to leave us with a deficit during this period of time and this kind of stuff. But these are their numbers. Those are their numbers. I didn't make any of this up. $141,000 at the end of 2044 versus $14 million. And if you look at the 7.32 math, it's, if I've added that in the columns here, it comes out to, what, 14 million for the 61% versus, there's the 17 million, actually. It comes out much better any way you go with
certainly in the long run, yeah, and I think that was always the argument, but the issue is in the 10-year short run.
Right.
So somehow that would have to be paid for. You'd still have that ratio that we would have to pay for, and so what you may be saying is, okay, so we do a rate increase for 10 years and then we start giving money back? Because that'd be a good deal.
Well, I don't even go there in the first place. I say...
You don't go to the rate increase?
No, I don't go to the rate increase. And part of that goes to the Ranson $1 million sewer design prep, and that's the very first line that goes across this entire thing.
Yeah.
I split that out because it would go how to deal with that. And I believe we are in three instances, rates, bonds, and capital projects, we are CTUB's regulator. We are CTUB's PSC. And we should ask CTUB at the end of the day, when their analysis comes back on this 5.5 thing, we should ask them to include an analysis of what that $1 million separated out, because it needs to be, I believe, separated out in the first place. Now, the $10.5 million is part of the Giddy part of this. If we accept the state money, well, we can just paper over the fact that there was a $1 million due diligence error that our attorneys did not tell us about. And you know, everything goes away if you accept the state money. But if you split this out and you start looking at it, would this be a project that we would have financed by ourselves and put this much money into? Not. And so I think you do need to split this out, but I think we need to ask CTUB, come back when you provide Rockwool with that estimate of what this thing is going to cost them and the other cost estimates, that you need to provide us with an analysis of that $1 million and any other things, and then how it will impact rates. Because one of the issues I have, and if you look on item number F, here's the problem. And I go back to this rate equalization strategic plan. And this was the plan, if you remember correctly, and I try to not get emotional about this, that we were given on the last hour of the last day in the last meeting before we voted on assuming the public service district. No one's ever done any due diligence on this document. There are some things in it that dealing with equalization I don't know if we would agree with. But there are 6 things that we need to understand. Yeah. Thank you, Darryl. There are 6 things that we need to understand how the rate impact this whole thing. And that's the Ranson consolidation, the PSD consolidation, the Rockwool sewer line, the Flowing Springs sewer line, the strategic plan, and the Ranson, Forest Street, and 4th Avenue pump station thing. We need to understand that as a whole. We keep talking about these things in separate. We keep saying if we don't do this, then this will happen and it will go up 42 cents or 50 cents or this kind of stuff, which I think you had pointed out that 42 cents basically equals a $1.50 increase in rates for your average customer, because most customers only use about 3,000 gallons a month.
126.
$1.26. So
would you agree, though, even though we don't have the specifics on this, that under your option 3 here, or even option 2, but we'll just stick with option 3 because that seems to be of the option 2 and 3 seems to be the better option, that rates would go up. I mean, it would have to, because you have that qualifier in there. And so that would certainly impact the whole rate equalization thing that both of us, I think, are pretty passionate about. Unless everybody's went up to a certain level, then we could equalize it pretty quickly, I suppose.
I would agree in part, yeah. But I'm not ready to go there yet. I think when all of these projects are looked at in total, and I go back to a conversation that I had with another council member, whom I won't mention, Nick, that we took over Ranson and we took over PSD with the clear understanding that we would work to not raise their rates anymore, that those rates were effectively immoral. And it was the understanding of this council that we would work as hard as possible and urge our utility board to work as hard as possible, and if possible, bring those rates down. And I honestly believe that there are lots of cost reduction issues and things that are built into those 6 or those 9 projects, the thing. And I honestly think that we need to urge our CTUB to use every available option to work to bring those rates down, because the other option is that we did not get into, that I had kind of used my signals all like, I was not in favor of taking over the PSD if there was going to be such a high rate because of the difference between the low rates and the high rates. I was not in favor of that. And in fact, if you remember correctly, I voted against the PSD consolidation when I could not continue to, or when CTUB just wouldn't give me the information in terms of rate equalization. And then they dropped this on us the last hour before we were to vote on the PSD thing.
Just my understanding on I think being an ex-PSD customer, my understanding of our higher rates is because of the piecemeal approach to their sewer system. It was kind of a piecemeal thing thrown together. There was no efficiency, and I think most of us agreed at the time when we were talking consolidation to start with was when we consolidated, put it under one utility, then we would start getting some efficiencies. we'd reduce some redundancies. And that way, eventually, the rates would start to level off. And I'm with you, I'm following you, but it seems like if we, with this new customer that we have up here, if we do it the alternate mainline extension, that we're not going to equalize, so we're not going to lower the PSD's rates anytime soon, I guess is my point. Maybe eventually we will, but in the short term, 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9 years, we're not going to be able to do that because it's going to cost money.
I'm not so sure about that, nor am I sure. I keep remembering conversations that we've had with Hoy over the last year and a half. And it seems to me that on several occasions it was said that the PSC, whereas I guess the experience is that it took 10 years to equalize. But it seems to me that I remember several conversations where we were told the PSC no longer has that thought process and that we would be probably equalizing in a much shorter period of time.
We can't equalize 30% in 4 years.
Well, we
can.
We say that, but the PSC may have a different opinion on that.
What we committed to was attempt to doing it within a 10-year time frame. That's what we committed to in the documents that we approved, and the PSC approved, and the county commission approved, and the Ranson City Council approved.
And we may, but I can see 10 seconds after we take in a new customer and that customer is paying Charlestown rates, then someone from the PSD sending a letter to the PSC challenging the whole rate structure. And the PSC may be pushing us then to move the rate equalization along more. But I wouldn't argue your argument. I'm simply saying I think that we should wait until the number comes in from the analysis of what a 5.5 Rockwool financing this line itself, what that looks like, because that flows through this chart. When you look at the, Daryl, can you go back to the one with the green, I think page 3? Yeah. This chart is based upon that chart. And if that chart's got shaky numbers in it, then that flows out to this chart.
You got it upside down.
Ah,
Not that
sorry
I can
about
see
that.
it anyway.
Yeah. But the math on this is quite clear. At the end of 2044, using the state funding, CTUB generates $147,000 at that point.
I guess what I'm trying to understand then is what will the bid come for the Rockwool only line? How will that help us make our decision on whether to vote for the state money, state financing of this, or to go 5.5?
It's just what you just said. I think when that plays itself out, it will then generate a regenerating of this spreadsheet, and we will then be able to determine at the end of the day whether it is more advantageous for us to accept the state financing, or whether it is more advantageous for us to accept the Rockwool financing of it.
Oh, remember, the Rockwool financing that we're going to get on the 22nd, when that's going to happen, that's just to service them. It's not, has no capacity for all the other things we're talking about, has no capacity for Burr, no capacity to deal with the flowing springs issue and these other issues that you said. It's just basically, this is what it's going to cost to do to take care of Rockwool.
But this tells us, in my opinion, that we can ask CTUB to include that information, to do that analysis.
Yeah, well, the first step would be to say, this is what it's going to cost you for this, but let's sit down and talk. Then you go through the whole negotiation, and then it goes to in the PSC. So I don't understand kind of why that helps us to get the Rockwool only thing.
Well, in part because the state financing is built upon a massively overbuilt system. And thus you have $10.5 million, which at the end of the day will get you $147,000 back after 2044 and all the bond payments and everything is up.
Percent for all the.
Right, based on the 61%. And if you want a very quick, what I think is a good analysis of this, Mr. Levy's package of it's a 3-page letter that just kind of describes his analysis of this, and I think it's worth reading. But at the end of the day, we have one proposal with the state financing, which we think is risk-free, free money, all like that. And at the end of the day, that generates $147,000 back, whereas if there is some Rockwool financing of its own project, that generates $14.5 million. The math is it's clear.
And per your math, in the meantime, though, it's going to cost us money to do it that way.
And that's where
As long as we know that.
And that's where I think we need to ask CTUB to give us an entire analysis. I think part of the problem, Bob, is that CTUB, unfortunately, and I love them, but they live in two worlds. They keep talking about the Chester Hatch report. And the Chester Hatch report is based on some wrong math. But they keep using that. And then when they have to correct the math that they then have to send into the state, well, then the daily numbers get a little bit adjusted. And I think we need to, and then we had this conversation 3 weeks ago, where the Chester person came in and talked to us and that kind of stuff, and they're going to have to go back and re-engineer this or look at this whole thing again. So the $1 million that was spent effectively was wasted. They can't even use one of those 6 options that is in that sewer design plan. They got to go back and do it. And part of that is because it's based upon some faulty numbers. I don't think they can. I mean, I think there's a lot of it they should be able to use, but some of the capacity numbers are.
I think if they de-scope it, you're probably right, but they've got the plans, the blueprints and all that kind of stuff for option 5 modified, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think you're right. It's not going to take, the engineering is there, but I think we need to assert our regulatory authority. That's all I'm saying. And instead of asking CTUB to start doing some things, we need to demand in those 3 areas, rates, bonds, and capital projects, we need to start asserting our authority as the PSC would do in Charleston to them and say, these are the things we want, and bring them back to us at this period of time to give us a complete picture now based not upon the Chester report information, but upon corrected information that we now have a year later.
Real quick question, and I didn't understand. So when we talked about this last week at great length, one of my biggest problems was, what do you do with the $1 million? Now you said break it out. I don't know what that means. Who pays it? In the Tolbert plan, who pays the $1 million?
In Michael's world, Steptoe and Johnson would pay for that $1 million.
All right, being a devil's advocate, being a devil's advocate, all right. So that would mean, all right, so we're going to sue Steptoe and Johnson for the $1 million. All right, let's say, because it's plausible, we lose. Okay, so now we pay the $1 million plus court costs and legal fees and all this other fun stuff.
And
where does that money come from?
And what I said was in Michael's world. But I think realistically, we would ask CTUB to do an analysis, a separate analysis of what that $1 million means to rates and how that would flow through.
Okay, so
this
you're
document
saying we should add $1 million to option 2 then. You have $9 million, it should be $10 million. That's what you're saying, correct?
I'm not ready to even put that $9 million. I'm not sure that this line would cost $9 million based on the amount of flows and the amount of returns that it would come back at.
Okay, but, all right.
All I'm saying, Nick, is that we need to just simply, instead of saying automatically dropping $1 million here or there and saying this is, who's going to pick this up, we should ask our utility or demand of our utility that they give us an analysis, an independent, separate analysis of how that $1 million could be made up and blended into the rates. And by the way, you have 7 other
So
projects.
you're asking CTUB to then basically value engineer $1 million out of whatever project?
Well, they would,
Just let him answer.
you say value engineer.
You want, okay, so you would like to, I just want to be crystal clear what you're asking CTUB for. You're asking for a smaller project but still absorb the $1 million.
No.
I just want to be crystal clear where that $1 million
No.
is going.
I think, Nick, we need an absolutely separate analysis of the $1 million.
Well, and
Now,
keep in mind,
that may require us to blend those rates in, but I want to understand how that impacts those rates. And I wanted to understand how that impacts those rates over a period of time of 40 years, where at the end of which we will be generating $14 million total from this. And we start generating $1.3 million in 2032. You know, I didn't make this up. It shows a substantial amount of money that comes back if we use Rockwell-only funding.
Mike, can I add one thing about the debt? That we're all assuming that this is currently our debt. This is not debt on the books of the city of Charlestown. This is currently debt with M&T Bank that's held by the city of Ranson. You don't just get to assign somebody else your line of credit. They couldn't even do it if they wanted to. I mean, M&T would have to allow us to assume that line of credit. They would have to approve us for it, just like anything. I can't just say, oh, you now own my credit card, and that's your debt, and then the bank's coming after you. And with the amount of money that it's generating in interest every day, what did you say? It was like $140 a day approximately? Something like that? I thought somebody said it.
143. Ross said that. Would you say, Mr. Ross? Got it.
Regardless, it's certainly generating a significant amount of interest. I mean, it's currently $1 million line of credit. Ransom would be banging on our door and shipping it over to us if they were 100% positive that we had a legal obligation to assume it. And they're being eerily silent over there about what they want to do with that $1 million.
I don't think they've been silent. They have a 7-page letter in our packet agenda, if you read it, number one. Number two, I think the issue and the problem, Mike, is that we approved the agreement and took on, when we consolidated with them, consolidated is the wrong word, the acquisition of their assets, also committed to assuming their obligations. That's the problem.
Which we
It's
were
not
told they had none.
A debt on, agreed. We have a disclosure issue. I do not dispute that at all, but I'm just saying you are characterizing it as they carried a debt that, you know, they're suddenly going to transfer over to us like a credit card. That's not what we're talking about. At least our utility board was aware that they were undergoing these design and engineering costs. It's going to be a little bit difficult for us to make that argument.
Then we should ask our utility lawyer. Haven't gotten one yet.
But I mean, I solved that problem in effect by saying, let's look at this debt in a separate mechanism instead of just automatically dropping it into the state funding where it kind of disappears as kind of a mistake. That we look at it separately and we consider it separately because it is a separate cost. And I'm not in favor of effectively going after Ranson for it. As I've said, I don't think it was Ranson's fault. Maybe the first thing, maybe the only thing that's not Ranson's fault in this damn thing. But
and I actually agree with that.
Yeah.
I think they did disclose it to our utility board.
yes, and it was a failure of due diligence of our utility board and the utility board's attorneys to disclose that information to this council.
But even with all that being said, wouldn't you agree that the Charlestown Building Commission has a different role and responsibility than the Charlestown Utility Board? As far as I know, the Charlestown Building Commission has no responsibility to CTUB ratepayers. Their responsibility is to the citizens of Charlestown, which, yes, most of those people are ratepayers, but they don't have an obligation outside of there. And so this could be, you could get funding for this project other ways, but funding it through our building commission, who has no responsibility to make a 6-mile-long sewer line in Ranson, just doesn't make sense to me.
Can I ask why suddenly that's a big issue, though? Because
It's always been a big issue. I bring up at least a dozen things every meeting.
I don't recall in
But I
debate
will.
discussion workshops over the last 7 to 8 months that the big issue was the building commission holding the bonds. It's a new issue we're bringing to the table. I'm not saying it's not a legitimate issue,
I've
but it's
brought
not.
it up multiple times
It's
about our
not been
building
one.
commission.
We've discussed why that's happening, why the financing was set up that way. We've had a lot of discussion about that, but
And Ann, I did go in front of the building commission. I asked them to table it. That was some months ago. So it has been around about using the building commission to hold the bonds.
I'll take a crack at that. Lessons learned. I think never again should we involve our building commission in the construction of projects that are outside the municipal boundaries of the city of Charlestown. This was a mistake. We should admit that it is a mistake. And we should not put our building commission in this situation. But as I've kind of written to another council member, the building commission's vote comes after this council's vote. And we're the ones that are ultimately going to make that decision, right or wrong, approve Rockwool or not approve Rockwool. And then the building commission will do that. Well, excuse me, not approve.
But is the building commission an independent body?
Yes, we
So the building commission, if they're not comfortable with this, if, let's say it passes tonight from us, the building commission does not have to pass.
But I think we need to, in the future, not involve the building commission
Fine.
in these projects. But since the building commission is already involved in this, we went through the due diligence process. We knew this was going to happen. We need to lead on this one. We need to take the hit and not put this on our building commission and either say yes or no to the funding aspects of this sewer line.
I just have a little more confidence in the building commission than perhaps Mike does. But
It's not that I don't have confidence in them. I think that we're privy to a lot more information than they've been privy to.
But the building commission can decide yea or nay, depending on, they don't have to, like if we, let's say it gets passed tonight. Shh, please. The building commission, they have the option to vote it down. They say, look, we don't want to take on this $16 million debt.
And then I think, you're right, and then I think the lawyers for CTUB would come back and give us a proposal where the money would move cleanly through the normal mechanisms. I mean,
yeah, we talked a little bit about that as an option a long time ago. That if council chose not to, or council acted to vote in the affirmative, send it to the building commission, and they opted to not do that, that one option would be to bring it back to council and to fund it through the more traditional mechanism. Now, again, we may have run out of time for that option, but I mean, we talked about that a long time ago as a potential option. I would just add, Councilman Trainer, again, we all agree that the building commission has independent authority to act on this, on their bond ordinance, without having to follow the will of council. But I will tell you from a staff perspective, I mean, we have been encouraging them to follow the city council discussion. I know they're not following it nearly as closely as the council members. I don't want to suggest that, but they are following it. We have been passing information along to them so they understand the implications of what it is that they're acting upon. And we've tried to characterize this very much as, allow city council to direct you on this issue so that we think that the building commission's role has been mostly to help council carry out its wishes I mean, it helped council carry out its wish with respect to Charles Washington Hall. I mean, on their own, they would not have independently gone out and approved a bond. I mean, they approve a bond because council has indicated, you know, we think this is an important project for the city of Charlestown. We're prepared to enter into a lease agreement to make sure you get paid back, and, you know, and then the building commission acted. My general view on this, I don't think this is much different. Again, I think council directs them, and the building commission helps council carry out its wishes. But at the end of the day, it is their vote, and it is an independent vote, and they know that that is the case. So I just want to make sure people understand kind of how we have phrased this to the building commission.
So if the building commission is the big issue, which seems to be, I think it's legitimate. We could approve is there a way to approve the state money without involving the building commission?
Well, again, then we would go back to the beginning of the process, because you don't have an ordinance in front of you to issue a bond.
Right.
You have an ordinance in front of you to execute a lease agreement and to authorize the building commission to issue a bond. So this group cannot on its own just choose to do that. Again, we'd have to start over, go through a 3-reading process. We'd go through a public hearing process on a bond ordinance.
Bob, all I'm arguing is that, you know, I think, you know, the horse has left the barn in terms of the building commission, and we need to lead on that. And the next time that we should not involve the building commission in things that go outside of the municipal boundaries of this county. Now I think I hate to say stuck with this decision, but I think we're stuck with this decision on that one. So all I'm arguing is that I think that the math needs to be recalculated. Now, I hear the words and stuff back behind me. I know CTUB is going to come 5 minutes after this meeting and say you're wrong here, 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 and here, and here. But I would appreciate that, because we have not gotten all of the information that we need to make this decision, and we are about to make this decision based upon the math in the Chester report, which, according to that thing, is wrong, of $10.5 million. And all I'm saying is that with this saying difference between $147,000 and $14 million, I don't think it would kill us to wait until the analysis is in as to what the impact of this project is going to be with the Rockwool part of paying for it and financing it, and then telling them that there are 5 other service agreements, and how does that look? Because as I've been told many, many times before by someone that we all know, 5.5 is designed to protect the ratepayers, the current ratepayers. This whole process seems to be, we're being told somehow or another, if we don't approve this thing, there's going to be this increase. Well, 5.5 was designed to make sure that there would not be an increase, and that the cost would be on burden to the people that are using the pipeline. And I'd like to know, based upon the new math, how this thing plays out with the new analysis.
Right, so we still have the main motion in front of us.
All right. Any further discussion, or do we want to call the vote?
Honestly, obviously, it appears we're about to vote on this. I just want to say I appreciate everybody listening to, I know I've said a lot over the last 8 months, and it's been some long meetings, and the people have said a lot. I'm not going to think any differently of anybody on this body, you know, depending upon how they vote. But I did want to read one thing before we do vote, because I got on this council 2 years ago, and I took an oath to defend the West Virginia Constitution, to serve the people of Charlestown. And so I just want to read the West Virginia State Legislature 6-9A-1, Declaration of Legislative Policy. The legislature hereby finds and declares that public agencies in this state exist for the singular purpose of representing citizens of this state in governmental affairs. The legislature hereby further finds and declares that the citizens of this state do not yield their sovereignty to the governmental agencies that serve them. The people in delegating authority do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for them to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments of government created by them. And the most important part, the government also benefits from openness because better preparation and public input allow government agencies to gauge public preferences accurately and thereby tailor their actions and policies more closely to public needs. And so that's what we should be doing.
All right, if there's no other discussion, all those in favor of approving the bond, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
The bond passes 5-3. All right, let's adjourn for 10 minutes so we can freshen up. We are back to order. We're going to go back in the agenda. We're going to move back to 3257, levy estimate, budget document, fiscal year 20 operating, coal severance, and capital budgets.
So this is the item we talked about at the workshop last session. We've updated the operating budget to include the half-year numbers. So you can see that there's about $300,000 in excess revenues over expenses so far this year. That was the only change from what you've seen before. So what we need then is a motion to approve the levy estimate, which we'll then send to the state auditor. They'll get back to us on whether or not we've met all the state requirements, and then it'll come back to the full board in mid-April to lay the levy or approve the final budget.
So just to clarify, the levy's the same as last year?
That's right.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It was unanimous. All right, we're headed on to some new business here. 3246, resolution for National Park Service grant for historic revitalization program.
Members, yes, this is just a grant from the National Park Service. The City Council would essentially, the City of Charlestown essentially would be a pass-through agency for this grant. The grant would come to the city, and then the city could make the grants. We've identified some structures that have long needed some attention as probably the primary agencies or nonprofits and historic resources that we would fund for this. I can provide more details if you like, but that's the crux of this resolution. So we just need you to, there's no match, it's the biggest part as well. It's $750,000 that we are going for. And if you need additional details, I can provide that to you, but at this point, I just need a motion on this resolution supporting it.
I move to accept the resolution to provide support for Charlestown program to provide historical revitalization subgrants for historical preservation.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion unanimous. Thank you, Seth.
I think I have like multiple in a row.
Oh, good. So
Stay
now
up
we're
there.
going
Yep.
3259, sidewalk improvement program.
Yes, this is just an FYI. You allocated in your 2019 budget year funds for matching grants for the sidewalk. This program and the documents that you see attached in your agenda is essentially modeled off the facade improvement program grant, which has worked well, and we've kind of worked out some of the bugs with that. And again, have used this as a model, and this is what people will use to submit for the matching grants. The matching grants is up to $5,000. I can take any questions or comments, but we intend to roll this out in the next few weeks. and we'll make some public announcements, social media, send you all emails so you can send it out to others, and get some other media attention on this.
I think the document needs a lot of work. I like the gist of the program, but the document itself needs an awful lot of work. We can either sit down and talk about it, or we can go through it now, but
Okay, I found some typos, but I wasn't going to take it that far, which I was going to point out, or I can just send to you.
Go ahead and
But
send them to me.
My only policy thing was, and we might have talked about this before, do we want to include tenants in this one as opposed to property owners? I see it a little bit different from the facade improvement program, where I can definitely see a tenant wanting to apply for an awning or painting the front windows or some storefront improvement, but I'm not sure that's as wise for this sidewalk. I can't imagine a tenant of a commercial building wanting to pay. It's just so much cost involved. I guess maybe, I mean, I guess maybe. I
mean, it's
I guess
unlikely.
We could keep it in. It's
It's
unlikely.
it's
we would
unlikely,
get it.
but in the event that somebody wants outdoor seating or a better space and the landlord refuses to, and they're just like, I will accept this and do that. But you're right, I mean, it's pretty unlikely. I'll take the edits, and then Bobby, you and I can sit down.
Yeah.
But
I'd like to do that. There's a lot of shells, wills, Bamey, kind of. I think we need to clean that up. And there's some misleading things in here that we say one thing one place, and then the other place we'll
Well, let's
say
clean it
something
up.
else.
All right.
So, yeah, I'd be more than happy to sit down with you and kind of clean it up a little bit.
I wouldn't, I think it's a good program. However, I'm just tired of talking this evening. But I did want to remind council that we are doing this effectively because our charter was written the same year that Ranson formed itself as a town, which was a year before the Wright brothers got their thing in the air and women got the right to vote. Our charter needs to be changed so that we can authorize us to put in infrastructure packages, sidewalks, and the way other municipalities do this, instead of having our individuals have to come out of their pocket to put in these sidewalks that they may put a brick sidewalk in where someone else will put concrete and that kind of stuff. So I don't disagree with the program, but I do think we have to remember that we are in this situation because our charter is old and needs to be revised, in that provision that says that the landowner is responsible for sidewalk repair and putting it in needs to be revised and brought up to 110 years later.
Very good. Any more questions for Seth?
Yeah, I have only one more comment. We didn't address, does this have any impact on facade improvement? Can you apply for both in the same year?
they're two separate programs, so I would see
they're
them
just
as,
two
yes,
separate
yeah,
programs.
absolutely,
Okay,
that's
so-
correct. So you could.
So you could?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Any more questions for Seth? All right.
And do we want to bring this back one more time then? Is
I
that-
think it's really just more or less a share with you how your policy is being implemented and share it out. I guess the question is going to be, do you trust Bob and I to make these changes together and move
I would
forward?
recommend we bring it back.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we just wanted to make sure that you were aware of it before we announced it. It sounds like, again, there are some tweaks that we still need to make to the program, so we'll commit to doing that. Make those adjustments, bring it back one more time for you to make sure you're aware before it goes live.
Certainly.
Okay.
All right, perfect. Let's move on to 3260, West Virginia Community Video Showcase Program. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, I missed mobile food truck update.
Absolutely. So I was here in the fall of 2018, mentioned. You guys good?
Sorry.
I was here in the fall of 2018. We discussed the mobile food vendor option. I had several people ask me if they could set up mobile food vendors. It's not permitted in the ordinance. We thought, let's try and give this an opportunity to work and see what would happen. So drafted an ordinance from sort of best practices at other communities, shared that with Planning Commission. Planning Commission heard it, said, "You know, let's roll it out to the Promotions Committee of Charlestown Now." We went to Charlestown Now Promotions Committee, which is made up of a bunch of the business owners. There was some positive feedback on this regarding hours, location, and days that this should occur. They didn't want it continuously every single day of the week. But I recognize that we hadn't really gotten all the business owners and other stakeholders who were not at that meeting, and some of the people not at that meeting were actual restaurant owners. So you can see the flyer we created. We went door to door to every business on Liberty, Washington, and Congress, and provided this to them with the proposed ordinance and said, please just come to this meeting, which they did. We had a great turnout, particularly business owners who have restaurants. And they told us that as bricks and mortar restaurants, they were uncomfortable with this ordinance as it is, and that, you know, the market's not strong enough downtown, and that some days their patrons are limited at lunch and dinner, so this could be, you know, a direct competition. Obviously, the mobile food vendors are on wheels. They can go wherever. They're half bricks and mortar. They have one physical location. They work to attract people down here. So they were not at all interested in this or amending or making any differences to it to maybe make it more palatable. Several of them expressed that they've established express lunches or do deliveries, so they thought that they have been trying to meet the market where the physical stores are trying to meet the market where folks have a 30-minute lunch or that they just can't get down here for their food. Respecting that sort of decision, you know, they did state that they would be open to the idea of mobile food vendors once a month, some sort of evening event. They had no problem with that. But taking that information from the business owners, recognizing that this is something they thought was a threat, staff recommended to the Planning Commission, feedback back to the Planning Commission that this proposed ordinance not go any further, and that, you know, we got our input that we looked for. The input said we do not desire this, so that's the whole purpose of having it. And the Planning Commission agreed with that recommendation by staff to just hold this ordinance. Now, if things change in the future and the dynamics are a little bit stronger downtown, it could be brought back. Again, participation by the business owners would be key. And one of the determinations staff had, and just to kind of keep everything in full context of why we made the recommendation not, you know, to move forward, is not only did we hear it from the stakeholders that, you know, that we feel that this is a threat, but we've just hired a downtown coordinator, right? It's kind of hard to work with the business owners in good faith by saying, here's an ordinance you don't want, here's a coordinator to work with at the same time. So the Planning Commission recommendation to you at the end of the day is that this not move forward, and essentially it's really just a feedback to you, but they essentially tabled it, and that's the recommendation, is to table it and maintain it there. I don't think there's any formal action by this body, but it's more of an update to you, and if they were to provide a recommendation, that was it, just to not go forward with it. That's the full breadth of this topic.
I got some feedback too, and they concur with that as well. Yeah. Some businesses along that road.
Sounds good. Any more discussion on mobile food truck?
Yeah, I had similar conversations with people, and it came back to parking and competition.
Correct. Yeah, so we certainly appreciate council's willingness to explore it.
Yeah.
You know, as an option for altering our downtown a little bit. And, you know, at the end of the day, people have shared with us their perspective on this, and obviously it's easy to accommodate. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Let's move on to 3260, West Virginia Community Video Showcase Program.
Mr. Mayor, I know we went over the Charlestown Utility Board Oversight 3258, but would you allow me a question to staff, which is the status of the hiring of a utility attorney for this council?
So I don't remember the dates exactly, but we do have an active RFP on the street at the moment, or RFQ request for qualifications out on the street at the moment. I think it was roughly 5 weeks opportunity for people to respond to it. I have pushed it out to the attorneys that were identified earlier on. Remember, I said I had done a little bit of research of who could be some attorneys that might not create a conflict, what have you. So all of them got a copy, but then it's also available through our, on our Facebook page. I think we've got it also out on the city website as well. I mean, I don't know that we're going to get a lot of traction that way, but, I'm encouraging people to share it with other attorneys. So if you know of anybody, please do that. And if you need the document, I can certainly get it to them. Other than that, I really haven't heard back I haven't received any applications at this point. I'll check the date and I'll make sure that I let you know what date.
I imagine it would be a tough circumstance to walk into, but lots of billable hours.
Yeah, sure. All right, great. And thank you, Daryl. And let's get back to 3260, West Virginia Community Video Showcase Program.
So this is a program I just wanted to get some feedback from City Council before we pursued it. So if you'll recall, we did put out an RFP to update the city's website. And we did that late last year. We've selected a local contractor to help us do that, and we're in the midst of working through the redesign with them at the moment. So what we've done with them so far is we've analyzed the existing website. We've developed a new site plan, or at least a map, and just today went over a few layout options. I think we've narrowed it down to at least an option that they're going to show us how it might work. And again, the goal here is a little bit more interactive, definitely more functionality than we've had in the past with our website. What we really want to do is make sure people can actually do business with the City of Charlestown via the website, and also have improve community engagement. So those are some of the larger goals of why we wanted to update the website and the fact that it's pretty dated. So one of the tools we were talking about maybe doing is the National League of Cities and the United States Mayors, Conference of Mayors. They have a program that basically enables you to partner with an organization that would come into your community and do video production. And I think their commitment is that they would do 4 video production, or they would produce 4 videos for the City of Charlestown that we could put on our website, and they could be anything we want them to be. But generally, there's a welcome to Charlestown, an introduction to Charlestown. Usually you have the mayor on that, says welcome, that type of thing, shows you the great things to do in Charlestown, the reasons why it's a great city to live in. But you can do another one on economic development, you could do it on visitors and tourism, you can do one on community development activities, you can do one on parks. I mean, you can do it on whatever the city decides it wants these video programs to be. So at no cost to the city, they'll come in and do that. But here's the thing I want to make sure that you're comfortable with, and that is that what they do, though, is they will reach out to local businesses and see if they want to sponsor these video productions. So they've asked the city, in order to do that, basically you put out a request to the businesses, and there's a copy of the letter in the packet that would go out to them on city letterhead. And I just am trying to figure out whether people are comfortable with that idea. If you don't like that idea at all, we certainly don't need to go down that path. It is a good way to get some videos produced for the city, and that's a way that people, engage with a community. There are 6 West Virginia communities that are already partners with this organization now. There are 6 others that are in some level of production. I actually went to the Percival site. Actually, Percival is using the exact same company to do its video production. So that might be a good one, Mike, for you to go look at if you wanted to. So,
to be honest, I was approached by them, and this is a little about probably a year or 2 ago.
Yeah.
I didn't sign up for it. My only concern was there was a bit of a sense that they represented themselves as the town contacting you, and not necessarily a private business.
I'm with Mike on this.
Yeah.
I'm fairly certain that the chamber went down this road and hired a company because I had a conversation with someone. I initially was led to believe it was something to help Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Promote itself to business, but then when I actually agreed to have a phone conference with the company, it was clear they're selling these.
Yeah.
It's basically, as a municipality, we're giving our names
Right,
and
and
businesses to these, and they're basically selling these videos. So I just would at least say, call the chamber and find out what they did do, and I don't believe it was successful because I don't believe that they got any. I thought it was going to be more like those small, short videos of small businesses in our community strung together, and that I was just helping the chamber out by participating, but
Yeah.
clearly not. They're clearly making sales.
Yeah.
So
They do this
we just
kind of
wanna
thing
be
in the-
clear about what we're doing if we want to go down that road.
They do this kind of thing in the music business for years. And I actually got caught up in something like this years ago with some songs. And, you know, they put out a CD with some of my stuff on it. And it went out to all kinds of people, and then that was it. And they were selling their company using my material.
Right.
So, I mean, I was
Right,
young and naive, and it was,
I just want to confirm what Mike said.
really didn't do anything.
And I felt in the initial consults until I got to a certain point that I was being misrepresented. But
Gotcha.
it was being misrepresented to me what I was doing. I
Yeah.
thought I was supporting a community organization, and I was really purchasing the video of my
Right.
business.
But, and they could have changed the way they do things, but to be honest, it gave me such a weird feeling that I actually called the town and verified that, hey, is this company actually working, with the town? Because it just seemed a little shady.
And I can't remember the cost either. Do you ever quoted the cost? I don't think I got that far either, but it would be nice to know what kind of numbers they're talking about for small businesses and how, well, I mean, if we only if it's cost prohibitive for a small business and we're only going to get, APU is the only one that's going to buy one, I don't think it's going to meet our goals, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So anyway, I just like a little more.
Yeah. Well, and obviously, I mean, it feels a little uncomfortable to me as well. I mean, that's why I wanted to share it with council as well, because I don't want to look like the city is selling itself, to this company. And in turn, I'm sure the businesses that have their logo then around the city, I mean, they obviously want the impression that the city is endorsing their business.
Right.
Now, it all happens off of the city's website, but, I mean, that's not easily for the
Yeah, actually,
person
I'm
to
looking
see.
at it, and actually, it's just like a link to
Yeah.
their website.
Yeah.
It's not like it's
Yeah.
embedded in our website, it's just a...
In terms of what videos is going to be taken and who monitors this project, who's going to do that?
I mean, that would be our decision, local's decision, as I understand.
Decision, or
I mean, I could come back to you and say, here are the 4 I'd propose, or 5, and
need an ordinance? Do we need to send it to ordinance committee?
I don't think we
I
need
think
to
it's
send it to the
streets.
ordinance
I
committee.
think it's streets committee.
Definitely streets.
Streets.
Streets committee, definitely the streets committee.
Maybe Parks and
Well,
Rec.
yeah. Well, I mean, another option is, we could certainly, we could go out and find out what it costs to produce a single video or 2 for the city and put that on our website, and, I mean, just make that part of the cost of upgrading our
The more
website.
control we have over those kind of things, the better. So,
Well, and honestly, it's not that hard for us to just put our own links with, local business logos. Just put out a call and say, hey, if you all want to be advertised on the city website, put a page up that says, here are local businesses that have reached out to us, and put whoever up there that is a local business.
yeah.
Then maybe there's an opportunity to partner with like Shenandoah University or Shepherd University and have one of their students put together, at college level, put together a great series of videos for us.
Avis ought to be able to do that.
This as well, yeah. All right.
All right, thank you, I think that helps.
Let's move to 3207, roster of available poll workers.
So this is just in preparation for this year's municipal election. One of the tasks is to come to the council and seek approval for candidates who will work the polls. So we've reached out. This is the list of individuals who have agreed to be a part of the receiving board, the counting board, and then the early voting staff as well. So staff's recommendation is to approve this list of poll workers, available poll workers, and then we'll work through that with the details with them in terms of what hours they'll work.
I just thought one thing. I don't know if the first name, is that backwards?
Brianna?
Well, Brianna's the first name, but it seems like you have last name.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Sorry. We've typed it, yes, it's Bar Brianna, not Brianna Bar. Yes, that's true.
Just a small typo. Brittingham's
I know,
rubbing
you're
off
stealing
on-
my thunder. That's typically my thing. Is the affiliation based on how they're registered to vote?
Yes.
Okay.
It is a nonpartisan race.
It is nonpartisan, and obviously we have to have a Democrat and a Republican in the room at the same time, or an independent.
I will move approval of the roster of poll workers.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Unanimous? All right. Let's move on to referrals to committees and commissions. 3255, referral to ordinance, commercial design standards.
So Seth, the design standards,
Sure. I wasn't sure if you wanted anything, but I'll just make it brief, is that this is an amendment really to the zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance, but essentially it's about materials that would be used in commercial buildings and the requirement of mixing of certain materials to get a better quality building. If you want more details, I can do that, but I wasn't really looking to present a whole lot tonight.
So
If you went to ordinance first, ordinance could make a recommendation back to you. I could present to you what the concept is. This is also coming from Planning Commission, so I should acknowledge as a recommendation to you to the amendment to the subdivision ordinance and the Charlestown zoning ordinance as well. But it's really a material usage of commercial buildings.
So I mean, I think there's a procedural matter here that I'm interested in council's reaction to. I mean, because it changes the city ordinance, the thought was we should refer to the ordinance committee. However, it has gone through the group that basically does have the subject matter expertise on this issue. They've already vetted the issue and developed a recommendation. So I don't know. Do you feel strongly about it getting to the ordinance committee? I'm not sure there's much change that happens at the ordinance committee.
I would just want to make sure it doesn't come into conflict with any other ordinances that we have.
Okay.
If we could get Michael Funk to take a look at it, prior to coming to us, brief look. And we can certainly take a look at it. But yeah, that would be my only concern, that it might come into conflict with another ordinance. But certainly we're not going to, I don't think, debate too long about the mixing of substances at ordinance committee.
Sure. So it's really about the conflict more than the content.
Yeah, okay.
And I do believe that any changes to the ordinances, for the most part, when I believe we first got on council, I thought there were too many things that were kind of flowing into being approved that hadn't gone through ordinance. And I promise if it does go through, I will help to expedite it. But I do think everything that does change ordinances should go through the ordinance committee.
Great.
All right.
So
I would just add that Planning Commission really slow-walked this big time. This was not done in any way in haste. We had a whole separate workshop meeting on it, and it was a good 3 to 4 months out from the time this was referred to us until we brought it back. So it was not.
And they had a public hearing.
And we had a public hearing.
Nobody showed up.
There was no public, but there was, and we did make substantial changes to it over time, including where we placed it in the zoning ordinance. So just
zip it through.
well, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I appreciate that there's been substantial work done on it before it's even getting to you. So.
All right.
Thank you.
Fast behind me, they make me nervous sometimes.
So we need a motion.
Motion to refer?
I'll make the motion to refer to ordinance committee.
And I'll second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Now move on to 3256, referral to finance, city fees, and select tax policies.
So this item, Councilman Trainer, I think, referenced it a little bit earlier on the tax policy side of this. So as we were working through the budget this year, one of the conversations we had about is where the city fee structure is at the moment and whether or not they're, appropriately, priced, if you will. Obviously, the street fee issue has been an issue that the council has talked about at some level, and then the parks and emergency services, which are also part of that same fee structure. So basically, the referral here, or the request here, is to refer to finance to review the city's fee structure and bring that back to council if they recommend any changes to it. If we recommend a change, actually most of these are set by an ordinance anyway, so you'd have to then get it to the ordinance and get the amendment there. And in the course of our discussions about the city's finances. There have been some questions that have come up regarding tax policy. So again, the thought was to at least push these over to the Finance Committee for a more substantive conversation about it and see what kind of recommendations come back. Basically, the tax policies that staff is asking to look at, the B&O tax rate as it applies to contractors and Main Street businesses, and the level of taxation for local utilities. So this is back to the utility tax issue. So try to narrowly define what tax issues will be going to the Finance Committee.
So I move that we refer this to the Finance Committee.
And I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Real quick, VIN verification is $1 a bag.
Yeah, there seems to be a shift in the fees a little bit.
I did say that. I wasn't going to quite bring it up, but something's a little off on this chart. It seems like some things are underneath where they should be, and then
Oh, okay.
business licensing fees, those are really the B&O tax rates, aren't they? Because
Yeah.
a business license is a completely different
Then the B&O rates.
category. So there's a little, you
okay.
might want to take a second look at this before
this,
the
okay.
Finance Committee gets it.
We will.
And I didn't know I need a bike license. Corporal DeSarno is going to have to lock me up. Sorry, bro.
Bike license?
There's a bicycle license on here.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, we'll have the accounting team take a look at the structure again, make sure that it's right before it gets referred over.
Okay. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? All those opposed? Unanimous? Let's go to approval of bills, 3268.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Bills are passed. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? We're adjourned.
April 1st.